No doubt. All right. Welcome to The Last Word, episode number 100. 100. It is another glorious Friday. We're back in front of the campfire for some more looter shooter discussion. I'm extremely excited about our special guest, so we're going to get right into it. I want to introduce a lord who is not only the epitome of what it means to be a lore connoisseur, but whose passion for the Destiny franchise is only matched by his humility and extreme attention to the subtleties of storytelling. Introducing the creator and host of the My Name is Bife YouTube channel and founder of the Peasant Guard Destiny clan. The Lord with the smoothest yet most pragmatic voice in all of YouTube. And of course, everyone's favorite Warlock Lord Daddy. Live from London, UK. And kind enough to make his debut at the campfire of The Last Word. My man. Lord, my name is Bife. How you doing, sir?
Wow, that is probably the most illustrious intro I've ever had. My God, dude.
That's what he does. Roll out the carpet for you, man. How you doing, brother?
Doing really well. I'm very glad to be on Lost Word Pod here, especially for episode 100. Holy Lord, that's fantastic.
No pressure or anything.
Yeah, no pressure to perform whatsoever.
No, you are so good, man. We are so happy to have you here, and I thank you for breaking my chat. By the way, some of you guys, this is amazing. But no, seriously, anybody who's been involved in this game for a little while who's been like, hey, what's this about? They know you. So
yes.
We couldn't think of a better way to celebrate us starting this podcast during Curse of Osiris, an optimal time of Destiny 2.
Yes.
To bring you in and celebrate making it to this one. So, no, huge tip of the hat, and thank you from across the pond. So, no, this is amazing. So,
absolutely, man. And
thank you for having me on.
Yeah, man, a pleasure. Just to double down on what he was saying, it's we started, we were initially was it Flashpoint at the time? Before we changed our name, and the thing came down to I met Ibantis, one of my first Guardian cons, I believe, say 2016.
Sounds right.
Right, 2016, and then hit it off, and I'm like, man, this guy loves Destiny as much as I do. And we just say, hey, man, you want to do a podcast? And the whole thing just came from a labor of love at Destiny at its worst time, it was Curse of Osiris, the community's upset.
Oh, boy, I remember.
the dead game memes are going all over, and we're just sitting there.
The era of 2 tokens and a blue.
Oh, God.
People think that complaining about bounties at current season is bad. I want everyone to remember, we've had worse. We've had much worse.
You know about those dark times, brother. So it was just sitting there, and everyone's piling on. And me and E is like, yo, we still love this game, man. And what can we talk about to fix it, and so on and so forth. And then it just bubbled forth. And here we are, 100 episodes later, still doing it. But good to have the Lord Master in. But, we gotta interview the Lord Master, man. This is a man of many talents. A lot of things going on with him, man. So first off, I gotta ask some questions because I've been wanting to know. You know what I'm saying? So for me, obviously it's always good to have a fellow Warlock by the campfire. It's rare. There's been a lot of Titans that come through, a lot of Hunters that come through. We got a Warlock here. So my first question for Bife is, what made you attracted to the class? And second part is, who's your favorite Warlock in Destiny?
Oh, well. Oh man, that second one's a really tricky one to answer. Yeah, the reason to be attracted to the class in the first place is because previously, whenever I was doing D&D and stuff, I'd always play something like, say, a warrior or a paladin, and I eventually branched out into cleric because you can do the whole tanking thing, you can deal some decent melee damage with a few off-spec things, and then also you can cast magic, most crucially. And I sat there at the beginning of Destiny, I was like, you know what? For once, I'm going to go pure quote-unquote spellcaster. And of course, that's not truly how Destiny works, but I kind of fell into that kind of vibe of being a warlock as it kind of went forward. And yeah, it really did fit in the end, especially considering that I didn't actually start by covering the lore in Destiny. I started as another news channel who was just doing stuff day by day and trying to get details out there and trying to be ahead of the curve on the hype and everything. And then, I think it was Taking King I did what was by most considered like my first true lore video, which was a video about the Books of Sorrow, which
amazing.
So good.
That was the start to a series that is still not finished, and now with the current state of the world, it's totally on track as a result. One day we'll get to finishing that. But that's kind of what drew me to Warlock. It was a little bit of something different, and also I was kind of going into university at the time being, and I had lofty ambitions and lofty goals, and I was surrounded by this place of intellectual rigor, and I was like, this makes some sense. I want to try and, you got to try and like fit in with where you are and fit in where you are in your life. And for me at that moment, I thought that kind of appropriately did it, and I've fallen in love with it for many other reasons by now. But it's still left me in this place where I live and breathe the class. As for the favorite,
that's awesome.
Oh Lord, that's a
Get
really
to the
tough question.
You got to pick amongst your children. You got to pick amongst your kids. Who's your favorite child?
See, I mean, so here's the thing. Like, it sounds like such a canned answer to say Osiris because he is very powerful. And I don't think I'm going to say that as a result. I'm going to say Ariana. She's a strong warlock of the Praxic Order, very powerful wielder of solar light. Amazing story, one of the best exotics in the game, and Ariana's vow is tied after her. Also, Heart of the Praxic Fire, it was my OG. It was the first decent warlock exotic that I got. And it stuck with me through literally the entirety of Destiny 1.
Nice.
And that's I feel like I'm bound up in that story now,
Awesome.
It ties into so many of the great elements of the game, ties into Eris, ties into Crota, ties into eventually Oryx. It harkens back to the city and all the different Guardian Orders and all this other stuff. It's just Ariana is a kind of central calling point to this, all of it. It got to be Ariana.
Gotta respect it. Osiris was Tekken, but I like that. I like it was mentioned. I'm biased. I'm leading the witness. Yes.
Slightly, ever so slightly.
Slightly. That was
this man is trying to knock Brother Vance out of contention for his number one fanboy. So
I can't even talk about Brother Vance after Bife's latest video, The Great Deception. I can't even talk about Vance in the same light anymore. The trickster.
Oh boy! In a couple of weeks, when that Trials lawbook is completely attainable for some people, ooh boy, that's we're gonna have an interesting discussion about Vance. Let me tell you.
Wait, E, you're up because I got tons more. So, any questions for the lore master?
No.
I got
man, I'm starstruck.
I know it's all good, brother. We got legend in here.
Amaze, what's up, man? No, like for me, just when I've always dug into this game, it's like we started with Destiny 1 that had so many more questions than answers, especially when we had our vanilla launch and everything, and then you go through, and then when it comes to this type of game, it's like what kind of compelled you to almost take up like the storytelling role of this? Is there something that just like this is how it started and you kind of developed into it, or is it like I know my voice is amazing so I'm going to use it, or
well,
I can't tell you how many comments right now are like I would let him read me the McDonald's menu and I would still
people
go
in there like I want Bife to read bedtime stories. It's lit right now.
I'm trying not to laugh over here, but I wanted to know like what got you into knowing like just your ability to tell a story. How did you kind of come to that realization that was just a talent of yours?
Well, I didn't realize that it was a talent up until like honestly about 6 months ago was the point at which I had that moment where I sat there and definitively said to myself, this is not just a job. I want to do storytelling generally of some kind, I want to be the orator for a great world and for a great story. But the first kind of point at which I really decided like, hey, this is what I want to jump in and talk about, and this is what I want to do, was way back actually in Dark Below. I released my first video in The Taken King, but in Dark Below I was one of the people who was still hanging on to Destiny, even though Dark Below was unquestionably the worst content release that we'd had in terms of where it was. Like, 3 story missions, 2 strikes if you're on PlayStation, and then the raid, and then a few things here and there. It wasn't a great time to be playing Destiny, and it was kind of it was a very low point, but I sat there and I was like, there's got to be more in this, like I refuse to sit there and believe this thing that I've seen growing for years now has only got so much steam in it and doesn't have a story. I refuse that. In fact, I directly refuted that line of Destiny has no story, which at the time being was the meme, right?
Yes,
like,
bro.
There would be things like, Destiny,
Talk about it.
It's, At least it wasn't as bad a love story as Twilight. Oh wait, no, it was, that kind of thing, right? Like, people would meme on it like that. But I sat there and I said, no, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to find this stuff. And that was the point at which I really, really deeply started pouring myself into the grimoire and pouring my way through everything that I could find. And yeah, that's where my knowledge of everything really started to develop. I'd taken a look at things prior in a very sort of non-committal way, and from that moment on I was committed, and I just said, you know what, we're going to take a few days and we're just going to read through as much of this as we can. And by the end of it, I certainly didn't have a complete knowledge of everything. I had a lot of misconceptions I probably built in those first few days, but I certainly sat there with much more knowledge than I had before. And that was the first building point to it, and I continued to build all that knowledge up, and then eventually, in Taken King, I took the first real plunge, and then I started making lore content, and it got slightly more regular on the channel. And then, by the time Destiny 2 came along, I sort of said, okay, it's time to fully transition through all of this,
Cool.
And because that's where it really started. I refused to say that this game had no story, because I knew better, I knew better than this idea of yeah, sure, story versus lore. There is a distinction. But everybody sat there and said that the narrative team didn't know what the hell they were doing. And maybe in terms of the main campaign, they didn't. It was 3 missions in Dark Below. It wasn't exactly riveting in Destiny 1. But I refused to say that they had built a terrible world, because I loved the world. I'd fallen in love with the idea of being a warlock and of, having these different orders and tenets, such as the Praxic Orderoth, the Natanauts, or the Gensum Scribes, that you could always sort of pull back to. This world felt like there was more, and I wanted to know more, and I was engrossed, and I didn't want to let go of that, and that's where it all really started.
That's awesome. I just want to follow up on that, because I love what you said in reference to your desire, your fight for wanting more and knowing that there has to be more here, because we all agree, we all love this game, and we all feel its depth. But I have to thank you personally, because when I fell in love with Destiny 1, I felt the same way. And like you said earlier, the running joke was, story, Destiny, you know what I'm saying? Like there's no story, or so on and so. And literally, I would point people to your video. The way you describe things, even down to the intricacies of exotic weapons and reading lore tabs and stuff of that nature, or just the origins of something like the Bad Juju or the Last Word, and Thorn, and Dredgen Yor and Shin Mount, for all these great stories attributed to these weapons. And that's when I knew, I'm like, dude, there is amazing stories to be told. And you were in my opinion, I know you're humble, but you're the pioneer of that for me. Because at the end of the day, I would show people, I said, watch this video. You think Destiny doesn't have story? Watch this video and you tell me. And people will go, oh, okay, there's more here. It's just that they have budget, have to do a better job of conveying it and telling it. And obviously, it's evolved since. So salute to you on that, man, because you are definitely, in the lore community, we have a lot of great guys. And you are definitely one of those that definitely was in the forefront to help pioneer and make it cool to say Destiny has a story.
I want to go ahead and say that this is a little shout out, I hope you don't mind, but the true pioneer of all this, the OG pioneer, I think, unquestionably was Sir Wallace. Sir Wallace, way back in the day. Oh my lord!
Yes.
He is the reason why I hesitated initially to jump into lore content, because I was like, I don't want to crowd in on his stuff. That's his space. And then eventually I sort of talked myself down from such a silly notion as a single creator owning a space. And that's another thing that needs to be highlighted is I think I love the lore community most because of this notion that it doesn't belong to any one person.
Yes.
There will occasionally be points at which my followers will go ahead and say, no, the lore belongs to Biaf, and I will literally go into those threads and I will say, stop it.
Stop it.
Stop. No. Bad. Stop it. Go home.
Knowledge should be for everyone.
Indeed. And this is the thing, right? Like, when you look at something as simple as the very concept of truth, truth is in itself kind of blind. Like, it doesn't care for one side of anything. Truth in itself is a singular thing. And it doesn't belong to anybody. It doesn't necessarily favor anything intrinsically. It just is. Right? And like, we all have different perspectives that give us a lens on that truth. And the only thing that can possibly happen by another person also jumping in a lore space is that we get another one of those lenses. And if all those lenses add up, we get a more complete picture of everything. Right? So, like, ultimately, that's how we have to look at it. Like, yes, I think it's fair to say that I have the biggest microphone when it comes to the lore community, just based on sheer numbers of Twitter followers or YouTube subscribers or any other silly metric that you might use to measure it. But that does not mean that my voice is more important. It certainly doesn't mean that my voice needs to be the one that everyone immediately refers to. And it also doesn't mean I'm the wisest. And I feel like, to access the rest of it, like, it's the most important thing we can do is encourage more people to jump in. So, like, yeah, I mean, I think that's really the number one thing. I say that to, like, the ideas of the lore community generally as a rule, I think, as well. Like, there's no such thing as, like, crowding someone out of their space on content creation. It's just people have their preferences, people watch what they want to watch, and at the end of the day, the idea that some place is your space and someone else shouldn't crowd into it it's a bit childish. It's like, come on, dude. Like, no, nobody owns this. Like, it's not this one person's sole property. Like, everybody can jump in and do this. Like, yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, literally, if there weren't people who believed that, I wouldn't be a thing. We'd still have Wallen doing his thing.
That very true. No, very true. And very humble. Continue.
You know, like, fairness to everybody who's jumped in as well. And, like, there are people who don't like to watch mine and instead will be like, okay, I want to watch someone like, say, Mylan, or I prefer a podcast form, and I want to listen to Focus Fire chat. Or alternatively, it's just, hey, I literally only want to read the stuff for myself, and then you go to Ishtar Collective. Like, you know, everybody has their own different way of consuming this stuff and being a part of it. So that's how all the different voices come together.
Awesome, man. Like I said, salute on that, and love the humility as well. Really cool dude. Now, question I got for you in reference to lore continuity, and I think something Destiny has been hit or miss sometimes, where, you know, we've had these great characters or great stories, and then, you know, we have a story campaign, we have some cool strikes that may tie in, and then, you know, let me give you an example. One of the good examples I always point to is stories like, as far as the Taken King saga, right? And then something like Forsaken, where you have that main campaign, you have your antagonist, you have what's going on, and then it transitions story-wise right into it and into the strikes. And then which is very important, the raid, right? Because I feel the raid is something that Destiny does so well. It's such a unique experience. And like when you beat the Taken campaign and it's like, no, it's not over. You know, Eris puts thing down, and now we have to go confront Oryx, right? So my question to you is, because one of the point of contentions we've had on Last Word, we said, is that we're not the biggest fans of raid layers. So only from the standpoint, because like you had something like Curse of Osiris, and you know, you had, what was it at that time? Was it Spire Stars? Not Spire.
Eater of Worlds.
Eater of Worlds. Thank you. Yeah. Right. And it just felt like such a disconnect. Like, why are we here? What is the purpose? You know what I'm saying? In comparison to the main story. So like, what do you feel in reference to things that maybe Bungie can improve story-wise as far as transitioning things? Or do you think that you've seen tremendous improvement now going up into the most recent content?
I think it really depends. What you highlight there back in Curse of Osiris, and admittedly also in Warmind, is what I think was a huge problem with the structure of how they made stories and expansions, you know? It was this idea that the raid was completely separate, you know? Like, we had Zol and Nokris, Zavala, Rasputin, and Anna Bray all stuffed into Warmind, all stuffed into 5 story missions, 2 of which were strikes, you know? Like, that in itself, to me, felt kind of criminal in terms of the amount of story opportunities that got squandered, you know? Like, Zol's a literal worm god, and we killed him with a javelin. Like, that was, for me, that was one of the moments where seeing that and then seeing that the raid layer was another thing on the Leviathan was a bit crushing, because I sat there and I thought, isn't this the point at which we can sit there and maybe see, like, Nokris's Ascendant Realm, perhaps? If he maintains such a thing? It's still kind of, the debate seems out on that, but I don't know. Like, yeah, it just felt like a squandered opportunity.
Right.
And, you know, they admittedly did have good stuff coming along later with Whisper. Like, Whisper was very much light on story stuff, but the implications just from Zol whispering and from the weapon that you got, yeah, fantastic. And it was a really good way of saying, like, hey, we haven't completely forgotten this element of storytelling. I'd say that it got much better in Forsaken, and I'd say that from that point on, they kind of worked it through a lot of the stuff in the expansions that followed and the seasons that followed, particularly with raids. So the thing that was wonderful about Forsaken is that effectively it all tied into this big story moment, you know, like Aldrin's death was effectively the end of Act 1, Riven's death was effectively the end of Act 2, and Act 3 ended with dueling Karu at the end of the Shattered Throne. And the amazing thing about all of that is it felt like it had a coherent structure up until, like, you know, Shattered Throne came along, and Shattered Throne is an amazing piece of content in terms of gameplay, but doesn't really have too much story behind it in itself as the activity goes. Like, yes, it's part of the Dreaming City cycle, and everything that comes with that is phenomenal to speculate about, and Truth to Power is completely nuts, but the actual activity doesn't provide you with many big story beats. You know, it's a daughter of Savathun, and, you know, that nothing, narratively speaking, goes on except for you kill her every 3 weeks. Which, you know, it sounds...
pretty much,
It sounds a little odd to put it out there, but yeah, that's where I think it fell apart. I'd say that Bungie has gotten better at weaving the raids into the story. I say they still need more work on it. And I think that's kind of demonstrated best by Garden of Salvation. Because you had the end of the story, right? And you had Salvation. And then it was a bit of a non sequitur into the raid. Right? Like, Eris literally just starts it and says, they take us for fools, and it's like the artifact just randomly started emitting a signal. There's no cutscene to indicate that. Eris just says it. You know? Like, there's got to be these conjoining moments, you know, these joints to the different story arcs that link it together. And similarly, with the end of the raid, you find one of the statues, similar to what you find in the Pyramid Ship. And that's, you know, the implications of that being in the Black Garden in the first place, at the very top of the mesa that everything sort of centers around, that has been clearly, you know, part of the Darkness's reach to corrupt the Soul Divisive from the very beginning. Phenomenal story potential. And then they don't really do anything with it. Like, it's just there, you know? Like, admittedly, we finish the raid, and then we get every week a communication from the Darkness in the Unveiling book, and that's really awesome. I love that from the standpoint of the lore. But it, you know, the next story beat we get after that is then Eris talking, well, not talking, but standing by and touching the statue in the pyramid. And, like, all of these different moments in themselves are good. They're like the peaks of mountains, you know, or maybe even just the bumps in, you know, the hills between valleys. They need bridges connecting them. Otherwise, they are pointless. They are fun little fodder, but they don't seem like part of a connected story.
A whole bunch of loose threads that need to have some type of synergy. I agree with you.
And it also sort of bleeds into the continuity of the seasons and how they're working out too. Because take a look at, like, what seems to be the overarching theme of this entire year, which is the arrival of the Darkness. You know, you have Shadowkeep and the Undying Mind and how all that plays out. And that's pretty cool. But then immediately the season after that is Saint 14?
Yep.
Yeah. It's just 3 months of Saint 14 stuff, which is great. Like, I loved it. It was really good. But it had next to no bearing except for maybe one lore entry on Bungie.net and a few hints and pieces there with the Empyrean Foundation. It didn't relate to Shadowkeep at all.
Yeah, you're
and,
right.
like, you know, it's great to bring back Saint. I'm so glad it happened, but there was no continuity, you know? Like, it feels like we've just now started to really strongly pick up that storyline of the Darkness resurging with the Warmind bunker and the approaching dots every week.
Right.
You know, like, that's really awesome, seeing, like, a physical reminder of these guys are getting closer every single day.
Impending doom.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we literally have a doomsday clock.
Yes.
Right? Like, just think about that.
Yeah,
we have an actual doomsday clock coming up at the end of the season. It's going to be on top of us, basically. And yet, when we sit here and look at that, It bears no relation to the season prior. The Almighty stuff, which is posted as, that along with Rasputin is the main kind of draw of this season, also is not really truly related to the darkness stuff. Like, yes, the response will then immediately fall into how Rasputin hopes to fight the darkness, but it didn't start that way. And then when all of that's done, that bore no relation to Saint 14 either. Like, but at the very beginning of this season, I was convinced that we were going to have, like, a Cabal-themed ending to the season, that we'd be, like, tying off the Keitel story with all of that, and I don't know, like, it's really perplexing to see 3 months of nothing on the darkness, and then suddenly they're front and center again. So that's the thing that I really want Bungie to focus on. I want them to take a single enemy, or a single storyline, or a single, idea even, and just run with it and use that for an entire year's worth of content. You don't need to be facing the same enemy every time. You don't need to always have the same characters in that story beat. You can go around to other characters and talk about different things. But you've got to be able to, like, have a narrative that keeps people going, because otherwise it feels like you're picking up these narrative threads and then just dropping them, and that's so irritating to viewers and to people who are following the story, because at the end of the day, you know what that creates? It creates these moments like with Uldren Sov when he gets resurrected a year ago.
Oh, don't get me started.
Right? And then we hear one lore tab.
Angry.
Yeah, you hear one lore tab after that a year later, and now nada. Nothing. Zilch. Not a single word on Uldren. And, like, they have great writers, and they have the ability to make these good story beats. They just need the connective tissue. Like, they need to not forget about where this stuff is going, Like,
and
make
one last
sure
one
it
now before I pass E, fantastic point, is that the thing that also bothers me is sometimes I consider it character or NPC interaction after major events. And I feel like sometimes, like, take a point, like we talk, right, E?
None.
None. Yeah, like there's times like, all right, we just saved Saint 14. We go through the Infinite Forest. We do this amazing thing. You hear the reverence that Osiris has for Saint 14. There's no cutscene with them two together talking. There's no interaction. And then, okay, now Trials is built. We did the foundation. That's great. Osiris, when you stand, Saint 14, when you stand next to him, he will say cool things about Osiris and so on and so forth, what he's doing. But it would be so cool just... Shout out to WD Prescott in chat. Yeah, no bro hug.
Yeah.
Like, no bro hug, man.
Where is the, like, 3 pat slap on the back of those two guys? Like, dude, it's been too long. Like, where is that?
This man literally said this, one of my biggest regrets in the whole creation of the Sundial was for this purpose. And yet there is not one cinema, no interaction. Even same thing, similar things with Anna and Zavala. It's just like, we just need that NPC connective thread and communication about big events that just happened that have affected this world, and no one's talking about it. It's like, on to the next.
Right?
That's it.
Like, it's great to have some moments like this mentioned in lore tabs, right?
Yes.
Like, I think there's a ship this season which talks about how Zavala at the end of one of his days goes to meet Amanda, and then they're just having a little bit of quiet conversation. It's clear that Zavala is tired, and then he says, hey, take a break, let's go get some food, and then immediately she says, let's go for ramen. Right? Like, that's such a great little moment to have in a lore tab. But there's got to be more moments like that whenever the big on-screen main characters are coming forward and having these bits. Like, the one time when that does actually happen, the connection between Saint and Osiris isn't truly that in a certain sense, because it's one of his reflections. Have you guys ever been to the lighthouse, as in Flawless?
I have not yet, so you need to educate us.
So, when you go Flawless, when you actually reach the lighthouse, pull out a sniper rifle, turn subtitles on, and scope out the actual box where Saint 14 is standing, you will see Osiris there, except it's one of his reflections, and then it will bug out. They'll have a short conversation before you get there.
Nice!
Right? And it's not... And here's the thing. You need subtitles on because you're not close enough to hear it.
Gotcha.
Right? You need to have them on so you can actually make it out in the first place. You can only just see them making the exchange. And it's a little tiny Easter egg that Bungie's left in there. It's a little hint. But there should be more than that. And it's also important. It's so important because of, like... Oh, God, I almost don't want to talk about it because there's lore behind the lighthouse, and I mean, look at things like the Saints Vocation ship and a whole bunch of the others that have come alongside this new season. There is more to the Lighthouse than just getting Trials loot and being flawless. Like,
yeah, you got a video series coming.
You can talk about it. Go for it.
You can drop your exclusive if you like.
Okay. So, long story short, the original Destiny 1 Lighthouse emitted basically a musical tone of 2 notes.
Yes.
One of which was, quote, warm and smooth, and the other of which was cold and sharp. Right? Like, doesn't that remind you of a duality that we currently have in Destiny's universe right now?
That's the background right now, so yeah.
Yeah, it's light and darkness, right? Like, simple as that. So, when it comes down to it, that's really huge. And it seems as though that was planted there originally on Mercury by the darkness. So that's terrifying. Saint 14 and Osiris have some time where they are basically investigating this to a certain extent. And they're investigating it partly because of shit that Brother Vance has been doing.
Yes.
Like, way back in the original Destiny 1 Trials, part of the reason why he was getting us to do Trials of Osiris was because he was effectively taking that feed and allowing himself to listen to the Lighthouse. Because he was one of the only ones who could actually hear that tone. And every time a Guardian died, it would make a note. And so he was studying the music of the Lighthouse. And he even got, there's points at which, I believe the current one that's out is actually a point at which he goes before Mara Sov. And he talks about this, and she says, do not pursue it. She deliberately says, don't go after it. You'll understand why in time, but don't go after it. Do not pursue this. Spoiler alert, I think it's pretty clear that he's going to ignore her, it's a Friday, we'll get the new card out publicly to everyone. I know it's already available on Ishtar Collective, but yeah.
Let's get it.
Yeah, point being, the Lighthouse is up to no good. The Lighthouse is not a man-made structure. It is very much something that's been left behind by another force, and what it's used for is not necessarily known, but the implications of what ends up happening are huge and terrifying, and not good. Not good in the slightest.
No, this is not good. This is.
So there's a real story there, but it's got to be expanded on.
Got to be.
Yeah.
I mean, I got more.
No. We'll just literally probably keep poking his brain here.
Now, conversely, I know we kind of attacked them a little bit as far as things that they need to improve on. Now, one thing there's a little bit of controversy. I got to shout out to my boy Lord Paul Tassi, who we've had on the last word before. Amazing writer for Forbes. And I remember one point of contention initially that we had was the Devil's Ruin exotic quest. And a lot of people in the community were very upset by it. They were like, they gave the gun away, it was too short a quest, and yada, yada, yada. Now, I was actually on the other side of it. And the reason why I was because I felt that, yes, the quest was short, it was very easy to obtain. But one of the gems that I've always wanted was the lore and the voice acting between Saint 14 and Shaxx. And that dude, I was so emotional just hearing. I'm like, this is the type of stuff I've always wanted from Destiny. And they at Twilight Gap, they're talking about the story. Saint 14 is reintroduced to Shaxx again. They're talking about the state of the Crucible. The jokes are inbound. We got Shaxx singing. We like it is such a gem in my opinion. And I'm biased because I'm a Warlock guy main, but those are some of my favorite types. Shaxx is definitely one of my favorite types. It's just to see that interaction, even though Osiris is like, okay, Guardian, these two will go at it all day.
They'll be at this for a while. I'll leave you to wander about the world, I think is the quote, right?
Yes. So how did you feel about that? Just your overall thoughts about that quest and how maybe the lore was handled?
I think it highlights one really important thing, which is somehow, whether it's through adventures or whether you can do it via, throwing dialogue into lost sectors, or whether it's just by having banter over the comms at various controlled interfaces and various points. Yeah. Destiny needs to have a way of allowing more of that dialogue to exist in a structured manner. Because here's the thing. That quest is so great to us as Destiny players because we're starved of it. But in most other MMOs, in most other online games where characters like that are talking on the regular, it would be not exactly 100% commonplace, but it would be much more expected. Right. And we are starved for that in Destiny. And I'll admit, it's a different format than all of that. But there needs to be a different way in which Bungie can insert more of the stuff like this. Insert these great inter-character moments. Because, yeah, like, the Devil's Ruin quest in itself, gameplay-wise, was... It's a sundial run, and then running around Twilight Gap.
Yes.
By the way, somehow someone thinks that's worth $250 on a carry site, by the way.
Wow. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
We'll get
Not even
Devil's
kidding.
Ruin, $250. It's discounted today. It's $225. I'm making you a deal.
Oh, damn. That's pretty spicy. No. Anyway, that's totally aside from it. The point being, like, yeah, the gameplay wasn't much, but it shows how valuable those story moments and those story beats really are. So, at the end of the day, I think the most important thing for Bungie to take away from that is simply bring more of those moments to the fore, make sure that you're making use of them, and always, always, always remember that if you're going to have more of this dialogue, it's always going to be better. Like, even if there's little moments which you don't really think you can fit in, you could have them as spare, like, broken up bits of conversation that you find somewhere in the game. You know?
Yes.
What I would almost love, is if we could have a thing which was just, quote, intercepted transmissions. Right? So you could literally have intercepted conversations of people who are standing by a radio or who are talking to each other over a radio. You know, like if you're standing in the EDZ and a few other locations, actually, you can actually find a radio that spits out live transmissions and stuff. You know, you'll have, say, Hawthorne and not Fenchurch. Who am I thinking of? His husband is Mark. He's up in the tower. Oh God, Devrim. Yeah.
Devrim,
So
yes.
you'll have Hawthorne and Devrim and Amanda coordinating evacuations in the EDZ for refugees that need to be taken to the farm. Right? Like, you'll just see that stuff spitting out over the radio. I want an option to be able to play that stuff.
Yes.
Just like random intercepted transmissions that you can pick up throughout the game, which add a little intrigue, you know? Like, it doesn't even need to be something that is guaranteed to give you anything. It just adds flavor to the world that's really important for the sake of context, you know?
Absolutely.
And I really wish there was something along those lines. You know, maybe the structure that they have in place right now is fine, but if it's fine, it's only fine if there's more stuff like it.
I agree.
You know, like, there should be more. That's part of the reason why Devil's Ruin, for any of us, was really sort of salvageable as an exotic quest, was because it had an unusually large amount of dialogue, which I think is what all of them should be. Like,
yeah. It was the perfect marriage. Like I said, that interaction between the characters as well. Voice acting.
Yeah.
I loved it, man. Yeah.
It was. Oh no! I mean, that one.
No.
First. No, like that was. I've never waited for a timer to go down to 0. Hoping
Yes.
something else is going to happen.
and then it resets.
Yeah. And then I was like, is there more? And I just sat there and just watched. I was like, I had my recording going the whole time. I'm like, something else, come on.
You know what's
like-
funny? I had the exact same experience. Just exactly the same.
Dude, I just did that. Absolutely,
Also,
man.
yeah, Champion of Cohen, who's over in the Twitch stream for this right now, says something very good, which is like the Mars terminals. Yeah, something like that, except more accessible. You know, the Mars terminals are discovered, and they're fantastic in that sense, because contextually, in terms of where they are, they make a ton of sense, and it's fantastic for the sake of telling the story of Clovis Bray and the Cradle of Invention, where you find yourself on Mars. But outside of the Futurescape, I'd love to be able to just place something from my ship, you know, intercept transmissions. Like,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
About it.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
shit
shit
could use
question.
more. Go ahead. Oh, no, go
No,
ahead.
go. No, go.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, because I was talking to my brother about it too. By the way, my brother's nephews, your 4-hour history of Destiny, I mean, they're like 10, 13. I always don't quite know their ages. They watched it twice.
Wow.
what?
Like, they have watched that thing twice, and he's like, you know, they're kids. They want to run around. They were mesmerized. So I just wanted to give you that shout out from my brother kids. Shout out to Hunter and Arthur. If you guys are listening to this, we got.
Hey, Hunter. Hey, Arthur.
There you go.
Salute. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so they absolutely love that one. But no, it's like I was talking to my brother, and he was saying the way you've done many of yours between like Monkis's art and stuff like that, Bungie has some great artists. And even if, as you were saying, like, hey, at the end of Saint 14's season with Osiris, if there was like an animated storyboard, maybe it's not a full cinematic, but if you could have something like those animated storyboards stuck in, or a way to kind of kick off the raid and things that you guys were mentioning, all those little pieces in places that don't cost quite as much development resources, but then actually put the story front and center for the people who are like, hey, what's the raid? And there's a couple, you know, animated storyboards that go through. Doesn't take quite the production cost, but I was wondering your thoughts of trying to bring something like that into it.
I think anything where they can help portray more of the story is going to be good, but I think as per usual, the discussion for them is going to be in terms of cost. And when I say cost, I mean cost in terms of the development sense, not in terms of money. You know, when it comes to development, cost is often a case of like your capacity to actually create something. You know, it's a huge task to be able to create, say, the cutscenes from Taken King. You know, especially considering nowadays the expectation of higher fidelity and the requirement of many, you know, studios to be able to keep up with what is expected story-wise. And I'm glad now that they're doing more in-engine moments, because I have a feeling that that's probably simpler for them to do, and that they can probably do that amongst themselves, and it doesn't need to be something that they expedite to some other place. Well, not expedite. Expedite's the wrong word, I think.
Outsource?
Yeah, it's outsourced. There we go. Yeah, completely correct. But yeah, no, when it comes to that stuff, any moment where we can get some kind of interaction prior to an activity is important. And getting more of that stuff in the game would absolutely help. It's why I'm much more happy about things such as, say, you know, the conversations between Anna and Zavala in the Warlock bunkers. You know, it seems like really small things, but if you chart that alongside all the other changes they've been doing, they've slowly been working towards making a more nimble sort of case for telling the story in the game. So, you know, even take a look at a year ago, Black Armory was coming out. That was the first time where they did a thing where your camera panned to the center of the screen as someone was delivering dialogue to you in what would otherwise be a vendor scene. And it seems like a really small thing, but that's so important because it takes you out of that sort of mentality of this is a vendor screen. You know, normally you'll have all the quests sitting alongside as they're delivering dialogue. You'll be grabbing all of those. You'll be chatting to a buddy. If you reduce that UI and then center the camera on them and just have the subtitle text, all of a sudden it's a very different story. It's a case of, something's happening. Oh, I should listen to this. You know, it's subtle little changes and adaptations to the engine like that that really make this, you know, a change worth jumping into. And
absolutely.
Like there's small things that you absolutely need to bring on, and then there's the bigger things like dialogue. You know, like I really just hope that they expand on that, no matter what happens.
Well, yeah, I really do. I really think it's something that, again, especially the lore community, we really appreciate those little nuances when they do it, and because there's so much to be told. So I love that kind of stuff. What I wanted to ask you too, also, from just like a silly perspective, was like NPCs, right? And I know me and E, we've done this before. We've kind of like ranked our like top 3 or like favorite NPCs, just people that you either go past in the game world and you just love their dialogue or just really resonate with the character. So I know we did the Warlock thing, what your favorite Warlock is, but from an NPC standpoint, give me like the top, you know, say top 5 NPCs running around the game world that are favorites for you.
Oh God. 2 of them easily, Shurochi and Toland, just for their implementations as patrols. Yes. Like, the fact that they are there to provide you more context on the world is fantastic, but I also think I love Toland just because, you know, like occasionally you'll pass by him on a sparrow and then he'll be like, "Come, sharp one."
Yes.
You know, and occasionally it'll be a little bit more like, it'll be a little bit more BM, you know, it'll be like, "Come, squanderer." And it's just like, well, okay, yeah. And like, it perfectly fits into his character and everything. So, unquestionably, though, I think Toland clearly tops that, even though...
Right, so we got Toland, we got Shurochi. I need some more now.
One more, or just as many.
Just as many. Just as many. Let's go.
He's like all of them.
Okay.
Give me some standouts.
Oh man, that's really tough. I think Saint 14 in the tower is fantastic, just because of his idle actions during the world. You know, have you seen? I don't know if you've seen this one, Abontis, but as a Titan, have you walked up to him with the helm of Saint 14?
Oh,
I got to do that. So if you walk up to him and you're also wearing the helm of Saint 14, he'll turn around and look at you and be like, "Ha! You look just like me. This is good. We will confuse the Vala with this." And it's fantastic. It's so good. Yeah, it's just.
I never knew that.
Those are
Saint
like perfect
is-
little Easter eggs. I love those.
That's
He's
awesome.
such a wholesome character, but like
Yes.
the comedy gold that he's occasionally
Oh
capable
my
of creating
God.
is fantastic.
Yes. Especially in trials. He's like, I beat you. The children will point at you and laugh. I'm like, say 14.
It's like
You are
calling
going
you
in.
out. Yeah.
Yeah,
I am
absolutely.
Saint 14, and you are the ones who will make them cry.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Hilarious. When he was announced to be
Perfection.
the trials announcer, I'm like, it cannot get any better. And I love Shax, don't get me wrong. Shax is like gold. But definitely I gotta say Saint 14 kills the announcing bit. So that's a good choice, sir. Give me
Saint's
come
solid.
on.
Yeah.
Saint
Come on,
is
NPC in the game.
one of the best
Who else we
characters they've
loving?
added in ages. I'd say Spider's idle dialogue, and even the stuff that you get, even if you're just getting patrols from him, is really fascinating too. Because he's the only real... Like, he's a crime lord. Let's not mince words at all. He's not some upstanding, fallen gentleman of the shore. He is a crime lord.
He's a Yakuza
And-
boss. It's fine.
He is very, he's the fallen Yakuza boss. And the really fascinating thing about that is not just the fact that he says all the things you'd expect him to say, like, a new monarchy shipment wound up on my shore, we can get it back to them for a price. It's the fact that all of this culture isn't actually his, right? Like, Fallen who've adopted that culture are very much adopting it from old Earth traditions. And that's what's really fascinating. It's something that you can see with gangs like the Kel Scourge. There's actually, this time last year, there was a law book that came out called Stolen Intelligence. And it was basically a bundle of stolen Vanguard reports from the Hidden. And one of them was on the state of the Fallen at current. And it talks about, say, just the state of how they are as a society. Now, the really interesting thing about that is that they've lost a whole bunch of their cultural touchstones, whether that's, their actual home planet, because of course that was lost in their version of the collapse called the Whirlwind, or whether it's their old traditions, such as the ways of old that Varix talks about, or whether it's even the old house structure, because nowadays the only house that's really still around and making a resurgence is the House of Devils under Aramis. And, the House of Dusk is basically just a big conglomeration of Fallen that don't really have much in common other than their will to survive. And out of that, a whole bunch of scavenging gangs have looked at Earth's culture, and it's become their own because they didn't know their own. They haven't known their homeworld. And so they are the first of a new generation of Fallen who don't have any kind of, cultural heritage to cling on to. And Spider, as a result, becomes this really fascinating NPC because of that kind of mix of Earth culture and Elixni. He is such a wonderful picture of adaptability because he's taken what works for him in that moment out of a blend of both his own characteristics, the adaptations that need to be made to his environment, both because of physiological requirements and because of the society that he finds himself in. And also, he's just, he has a good laugh with it while he's doing it all.
He's having a good old time. He's having a good
He's
time.
also rolling in Fractaline right now.
Oh, yeah,
Oh
he's
my
balling.
lord! He's
Yeah,
rolling
balling
in
right
it,
now.
dude.
He's rich.
I call him the ultimate hustler, man, because you can get everything from. You got to see what the price of certain materials are this week, this day.
Man, his inflation rate is like outstandingly high too. It's
Yes.
terrible.
Ultimate
It's like,
hustler.
you want enhancement cores? Well, we can arrange that, I'm sure. How much? how many years are you lucky to be indebted to me for?
200% per purchase. Go. No, I actually wanted to kind of see those,
Go
like,
for it.
when it comes to NPCs. The one that actually always just kind of, like, tickles me when I don't expect it is Failsafe.
Oh, she's amazing.
Like, just because you'll be going through and then it's like, oh, it's like, and I'm said. Just the bipolar nature of Failsafe
Yes.
was one of those completely unexpected things. You're like walking around Nessus, this completely beautiful planet, and then you have the most sarcastic AI robot in your ear that is bipolar on top of it, and I'm just sitting over here. I was like, this is amazing. This is how you bypass, like, just like making me actually pay attention to the dialogue. It's not like, the smooth tones of Devrim K or Bife, depending on who's voicing that one for the time being. But no, Failsafe she cracks me up. And then of course Asher's pissed off all the time. But
I love me some
Asher. Asher Mir has a place in my heart.
Yes.
I will ask him what the destructive capacity of the Almighty is in Zetajules, and he will say, "No, Asher, I do not know, for I am a reckless fool."
It's like There's so many fantastic lines there. And also, can I just say, I may be the only person who does this, but I get half of the stuff that he's talking about in the Pyramidian Strike. And I'm like, no,
Asher for
continue. Continue.
They
Keep
made
talking.
Asher just for you.
Impossible.
You'll sit there and you'll listen to something like in Synthoneural Criticality or something, and you'll sit there and be like, okay, in terms of what a Vex is, I think I kind of get what you're talking about. And then he'll be like, oh, why do I bother explaining it to you? And I'm like, you could have just kept going. And no one else would have cared, but you would have made it so much fun for, like, lore people.
But the interactions between him and Ikora are gold to me. Like, it is just when I do that Pyramidium, and I'm just like, man, he is going off. And then she gets sassy with him, like, he did not say this to my face.
Yeah, basically. Which is such a great point too, because Ikora is one of the only people who's beaten Shaxx in the Crucible.
Yeah.
Like, Ikora's low-key, Ikora's a badass, dude.
And I used to hate on her. I ain't gonna front because I was an Osiris fanboy, but she's a beast. No, I've come around. Since D2, I've come around. And I'm like, and the last thing, not to interrupt you, with Cade's death, she really resonated.
Yes.
Because she's like, when she called Zavala, she was like, "Oh, we're not gonna ride." But he was like, "Don't say it." Cowardice. I was like, ooh, she cut deep with that one. I was like, man, that was some good stuff right there. But yeah, you are absolutely right, Mike. I think I have such more of an appreciation for her, and obviously her story, how strong she is, obviously as a warlock and stuff, which actually leads me into my question, which is in reference to Hunter Vanguard situation. Right? We know, R.I.P. to the legend, he is missed. But we have a situation. Right? And we have, a man who's been resurrected, who doesn't know his past actions, and the hunter there. And then the other thing I want to, in reference to, obviously we know he's a candidate, for that. But the other question is obviously Anna Bray. I believe Bungie recently, right? Didn't they change the actress?
Yeah, the voice actress.
Yeah, they changed the voice actress for Anna. Yeah.
So again, I could be looking more into it than it need to be, but when I see that from Bungie, I assume that they're going to be utilizing this character more, right? So my question is, to you, is reference to the Aldrin situation, how they need to handle it. The hunters don't have a vanguard. It's been a while, right? You've got pyramid ships coming, all this stuff, but the hunters need a vanguard. And then, could Anna Bray even be a candidate in the mix as well, or is this Aldrin's job all the way? Where do you stand on the state of the hunters?
So, the way that I look at it is this. Every hunter is a candidate, right? This is something that the Tower is very clear on, right? They basically let the hunters decide for themselves. But, have you read Tommy's matchbook?
I have
the
not.
Lore tab. Okay, so Tommy's matchbook expands on this point. This is a point at which Arnor, another wonderful Praxic Warlock, she goes into a hunter's den and it's completely deserted. And it leads into a story where she talks with the one hunter and his ghost that they can find. And it talks about how the hunters are abandoning the city and going on their own quests or taking long assignments away from any Vanguard duties because they don't want to be scouted for the Vanguard Mentor position. Hunters hate the Vanguard Mentor position because it ties them down and it screws with their ability to
goes
freely
against their
roam the
nature.
system.
Yeah, goes against
Exactly. Like, hunters, by their very nature, are scouts. They are supposed to roam free in the wild. And being stuck behind the walls of the city forever in meetings and different moments of administration is not the hunter's way, right? Like, that's just the nature of it.
Facts.
So when you sit there and you have any hunter potentially being a candidate, what are they going to do? They're all going to scatter, right? Having said all of that, even though every hunter is a candidate, I would be astounded. I truly would be stunned if they'd said, hey, let's make Anna the Hunter Vanguard. Because yes, you could confound expectations by doing that, but I don't know if there's a point to it. And beyond all of that, it would not fit her character.
Right.
In the sense of her free roaming nature, she is very much somebody who will just go ahead and find herself out in the wild. She is the kind of person who wants to be roaming free, and her modus operandi for doing that her motive for all of that is basically all around Rasputin.
Rasputin, yeah.
You know,
makes
like,
sense, yeah.
she is tied to him in that sense, partly because of her family legacy and partly because of her belief that his power is really important to the system's survival.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, for her, it would never be something that she would willingly take up, and she would just continue to flee that duty simply because of the fact that she has this connection to the war mind, you know? And this is the thing. That idea of having something more important than Vanguard duties, whilst also being a Vanguard, has happened before. Osiris. Osiris literally sat there and said, hey, if we're going to go ahead and protect things, we can't just look to the immediate present threats, which would probably be like the Fallen and defending the walls and reclaiming various bits of local territory at the time being. No, you had to look to the future. And you had to look to the things that could potentially destroy us as a cosmic
That's
threat.
why I
like
love
the
me some
Vex.
Osiris. That's right.
Exactly. Right? So, yeah, I mean, you go through all that same thinking and that same process, and the more that you think about it, Aldrin is the only candidate for Hunter who can truly do this, because he not only has fulfilled the Vanguard dare, but also he is a blank slate of a character now that he's lost his memory. He has no potential affiliation to any other group, because no one has shown him any love. He has this moment where he may realize what he's done, and he may try to atone for it and prove it.
Ultimate
And
redemption
beyond,
story.
and beyond all of that, assuming that, you know, all of the stars do align and everybody actually has a moment where they're compelled to forgive him for what he did, he's one of these people who does not necessarily have any kind of prior obligations, right? Like, let's take a famous hunter at any period in history. I don't know if they're still alive at this moment in time, but Shinobu and the Six Coyotes. Shinobu already has her hunter posse, right? She's already got the group of people that she'll be roaming around with. She's got the people that she's missing, you know? When you take a look at previous Vanguards like Andal Brask, you know, part of the reason why their group then falls apart is because they're missing one of their hunters, you know? Him, Shiro, and Cade used to run operations all the time, you know? And now they don't. You know, partly because Andal's dead and partly because Cade's dead. And
That's little technicalities.
Damn.
Hunters aren't doing so hot right now.
No, not doing so hot.
Yeah.
As Edna Mode would say, no capes.
No capes.
Good movie.
But yeah,
Good
like,
movie.
you know, he has no one in the world, and he's not tied to any particular organization. He is, for the most part,
Can
alone.
Ikora forgive him?
Can we forgive him? Right?
I'll forgive.
Like I've made peace with the fact that he's a different person, but not everyone in the community has, you know? Like, this is the thing. It's very much one of those well-written kind of paths of a character, I think, because it is a real question that Guardians grapple with, is I understand that this person is the same person in terms of his body, but a different person in terms of his mind and personality and maybe even choices. But it really does make us sit there and ask some important questions as a result, you know? Can you forgive someone for, you know, actions that they had no control over in what is effectively a past life as a different person?
Yeah.
Is a Guardian similar to their past life in any way, shape, or form? You know, that's something else that with Aldrin we probably have a good case study for. Does someone truly deserve forgiveness in circumstances like these? You know, all these important questions Bungie has basically thrust upon us and said, you will have to internalize this and think about it and deal with it in time. Figure out how you feel, and then we'll go ahead and we'll keep telling the story as it is. And whilst they've not picked up the Aldrin stuff in ages, and while they've teased us with moments here or there, I do wish that they'd given us more little insights into his story. Because you know who Aldrin is right now? You know who he is? It's a Game of Thrones reference, so if you guys haven't necessarily
I'm hardcore
seen
Game
it
of
all.
Thrones. No,
Yeah.
talk to. Let's go. Talk about it.
Yeah. Right now, as his resurrected form, he's basically Reek. Right?
Oh, God.
He is... Right?
Good
he
one. That's a
is-
good analogy,
He
yeah.
is the Reek to the previous Theon, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
And he
Yes.
doesn't remember his old life, so to speak, in the similar way that Reek does not acknowledge that Theon exists anymore for the sake of his own safety. You know, like, it is very much a case of he needs to be able to understand what happened and what came before. He's a different person in that certain sense. Like, he's been robbed of his humanity.
Absolutely.
And yeah, like there is a real parallel there, because it's going to have to be a case of you've got to, reconcile those two identities, and the present and the past, and you've got to say, like, okay, do I have any responsibility for what happened back then? Can I really be held accountable for all this? What's going on? Like, where do I chart my path from now on?
Right. No,
I kind of want
and
to
some people,
I was just going to ask you, like, when it comes to the Vanguard, I mean, Zavala and everything these have been through Ikora training under Osiris. When it comes to the Vanguard and them being, in the place that they are, somebody who, I mean, to the knowledge of like how much memory is wiped and stuff like that, it's like to have such a clean slate of almost no experience. I kind of wanted to ask you, like, is there any idea of what is retained for somebody to be, like, not to say like, hey, he's a baby going in where he completely knows nothing, but to say somebody as a fresh Vanguard fresh Guardian to be a Vanguard, is there anything that makes that like a weird step? I mean, it's like store-wise and everything we're saying totally makes sense, but as like fresh Guardian, you be the Vanguard, that seems like a very quick leap to get into that position.
Oh, I see.
I just kind of wondered what your thought on that would be, for it to be like, you're a new Guardian, bam, you run this place. Like, really?
Right, to earn the position, or
just his time to be, a Guardian, and I feel like Zavala, Ikora, previous Vanguards and stuff have been around for longer, at least through the story, as opposed to he's been a Guardian for, in the sake of things, like 5 minutes, and then he's going to go run one of these things. So I'm just kind of curious your thoughts of like him being so fresh, if that has any weight, or if the Hunter's Dare kind of outweighs like his freshness to this role.
So I think there's two things to really consider here. Three things. One is that there have been past examples, namely us in the story, where fresh Guardians have still accomplished amazing things. So, being fresh is not necessarily the immediate measure of one's success. Like, yeah, sure, you're less likely to understand it, and even we had to learn how to wield a golden gun if we were a hunter, or how to throw an arcbolt grenade if we were a warlock. But, like, all of these different moments do not necessarily allow some kind of immediate judgment of someone's capacity at the end of things, right? So that's the first important thing to really note on it. The other thing I would say, on top of all of this, is I think this is going to be a point where we'll see Aldrin's character develop in a big mainstay expansion, and that the capping of all of that expansion will effectively be Aldrin learns his place, becomes a Vanguard, and is able to take up that mantle. It's going to be one of these things of the campaign, so to speak, will be his proving ground. The other thing I'd say is that at this point, as a Guardian, Aldrin's about 1.5 years old. In our terms by this point, Aldrin has definitely not accomplished the same things as we have. By this point, we were killing the Taken King, right?
Yeah.
Like, we admittedly set a very high bar. We killed a god 3 months into our life. That's pretty small. We then killed his dad 9 months after that. There's not perfect parity, I'll grant you, but there is definitely room for a Guardian to grow in that amount of time. It's not unprecedented. Even when it comes to someone like, say, Zavala, you see in his origin story how he learned in the wild on his own to basically fight and made his way by himself to the city. Like, Guardians can do crazy things even if they're only a few days old. Yeah.
No, I feel about it.
Yeah, there are things worth looking into for that, and it's worth remembering that even a young Guardian can do incredible things.
That's a little question for me. The space, the impending space Doritos. Look, this has been a theme. Me and E have talked about this a lot, and as far as when they're gonna do it, obviously Shadowkeep drops. We're like, whoa. They're doing it.
They've been doing it. We just didn't know. They were doing it.
We just didn't know what the moon possessed. So we had that.
Before the question, can I just talk about it?
Oh no, please. Oh yes,
Because
please.
I can see the look on your face as you're talking about, it's happening, and I remember the exact moment when I realized that. Because I was at Bungie playing it for the first time. We played the first mission, and they told us, okay, you're allowed to record up to this point, you can't record beyond that. And there was like a group of 3 or 4 people who were Bungie employees behind my monitor as I turned the corner to see the ship for the first time.
They want to see
and
your
I
face.
think I dropped my controller and just held my face in my hands, and I was like, oh my god.
Yes.
Oh.
The writers are just staring at
Oh.
you like, let's see his
Oh, you
reaction.
did it. Oh, you did it.
Oh, they did.
Oh, this is happening. This is real. Okay.
Yes.
Somewhere there's security camera
Powerful.
footage of your reaction that inspires the writers to continue to wow us because of your dropping the controller, quote, drop the mic, like your
Amazing.
moment. Yeah, it's like, that's awesome. I can't imagine what that was
feel-
like, honestly.
I feel like there was an expletive or two that was uttered alongside that. I'm not gonna lie.
I believe it. That's
Believe
totally
you,
justified.
Yeah, we all were in amazement. We're just like, wow, they're doing it. We're talking about it, and we're gonna deal with something. So we had that. Then we transitioned God and Salvation, even a little bit more context at the end of the raid when you beat the raid. You know what I'm saying? And it's like now Rasputin. We go to Rasputin every week. We've got that doomsday count. We see that they're in the solstice. So my question to you is in reference, and again, me and Ian have talked about this a lot. How they handle it, because initially the rumors of what we thought would maybe this would be a D3 thing, that they would kind of extend this out and we wouldn't get this. But according to this, they're in the system. they are approaching, and me and E had this conversation, in reference to the storyline and real-time Bungie, shout out to Luke Smith and these guys saying, hey, the game's getting too big, things can't exist the way they are. Certain things are going to have to go. So what do you say to a theory that me and Ibontis have talked about in reference that something may have to go, like like a Titan or something of that
Talking
nature?
about a small moon, by the way, not the class guys, just so you know.
Exactly.
Just to clarify.
The Titan has to clarify.
Actually,
that
I've got to leave the
immediately.
Titan has
podcast
to
now.
clarify
I've
that.
got to leave the podcast now. The Titan's gone.
Yeah, you win in Guardian games, you're fine. So as of right now. So the thing is, it's like I always felt like something cataclysmic needs to happen. We need to feel a sense of like that they're coming, right? What do you feel? How does that need to be handled? Does something cataclysmic? Does something has to get blown up? Like, it's coming. So how do you think they should handle it?
I think the likely case is that they're going to destroy a planet or a moon. I like one of the D1 base destinations. So you're looking at. I don't think they'd destroy the EDZ because that's too.
Right.
A, that's too close. That's too far on the system, and B, hi, you destroyed Earth. What now? But no, I feel like if they're going to do something, I'd look at Nessus, Titan, and Io. I would sit there and say they are very likely candidates for the axe.
They
the
don't
chopping
notice.
block. No, absolutely, because at the end of the day, this is content that not everybody plays, not everybody uses. Titan in particular is just, have any of you guys gone to Titan aside from when it randomly dropped you there in a strike?
Bro, I literally said the same thing. I was like,
lost
Titan.
sector I farmed there, but no, I'm just kidding. But
I was like, rest in peace, Sloan.
Like,
It was
if we do
back,
this, if we do this, what do we realistically lose? Okay, we lose Greg, the fabled ogre, and that's kind of it.
And and you actually lose the least amount of strikes too per planet because it just has Savathun's song.
It just has Savathun's song, yeah.
Yeah.
So in total, I feel like if that's taking up a lot of room, that's a candidate for the block. But by that same token, I don't know how you reconcile that with also having to keep it in the game for story missions. But maybe maybe the patrol zone is different from Titan itself actually in story missions. I don't know. It's a question that I'm not 100% sure of.
Gotcha.
Either way, I think it's very likely that you will see one of those destinations axed entirely. And I feel like not only is that something that makes sense in terms of content, but also some of those locations can make room for other stuff that can be added, which will get played more. Because here's the thing, like, Forges might not be played too much, Gambit Prime and Reckoning might not be played too much, but if they can create something on a scale of replayability to Menagerie, it will be worth the space.
Yes.
And I think that everybody will be very happy about that. And also, going back to the original point of, like, the pressing thread of things,
Yes.
the darkness is very much capable of destroying a moon. You know, they've decimated Titan before. You want to know the reason why all the arcologies are all kind of bunged up and broken and full of water? There is a lore book that we got back in Shadowkeep. Tipped actually from the Season of the Undying, because you acquired it through Vex Offensive. But it was called The Last Days on Kraken Mare. And it talks about how the darkness basically destroyed the arcologies on Titan during the collapse and the events that led up to that on the human scale. And to give you a vague idea of it, I want you to imagine this. Everybody get your physics brains together and understand things. Okay, so let's give the example of Earth, right? You have Earth and then you have our moon. Our moon creates a gravitational pull just in the same way that our Earth creates gravitational pull on it. But for the moon, that creates the tides, and it's constantly rotating around us in orbit.
I think I know where you're going, because I listened to something recently with the other moons lining up. So yeah, go.
Yeah, basically, that's the vague idea, you know, like the moon will be able to pull on water, and that's how tides are created. It's literally gravitational forces. Like, you know, when you have the equinox, you've got the sun and the moon pulling in unison, which is why you get the strongest tides then. Here's the thing. The moon and the sun will pull constantly at the tides, but we're rotating on our axis as a planet, and, you know, the moon is orbiting us, and so these forces are always in motion. But imagine if you had all of that gravitational energy to a point, right? Effectively, what you'd get is you get more gravity on one side of the moon than the other, and then all of a sudden that pulls water and whatever else is pulled up by gravity towards that point, that singular point on the world, right? So imagine this is in geosynchronous orbit. The way that the darkness has previously decimated Titan is by basically causing that big geosynchronous orbit point of gravity, and it pulled a whole massive load of water to that point. It created a bulge of something like, I think it's 60 meters they talk about in the lore book. But imagine that, 60 meters. That's meters, not feet, right? So that's 200 feet roughly. You know, that's a tidal wave of the day after tomorrow kind of proportions. And all of a sudden, when the gravitational force stops and when the planet is no longer being pulled, that wave is then released. And it creates what is known as, you know, this massive tidal wave, which in the Books of Sorrow, something similar kind of happens, which is called the CZG, which supposedly was caused by the alignment of 52 moons or something. You know, all of them pulling at unison at one singular point because they were all aligned and they were all pulling at the same direction. The darkness is capable of a similar power. And the amazing thing of all of that comes together to simply put is one thing. It's a way of destroying a world. Because not only are you pulling on the water, you're also pulling on the planet's superstructure, right? So Kraken Mare, which is the ocean beneath Titan's methane oceans, has a crust of ice. And when the gravitational forces and their shockwave compounds back, it shatters. Like, it just completely and utterly crumbles in on itself. And there's this massive tidal wave of force that isn't just the force of the water moving, it's also the force of the energy that's been expelled by it, you know? Like, this is a huge amount of energy coming forth. And from what we can tell, this was really only the first attack of the darkness. If we're going to look at what an entire fleet of darkness ships could do if they compound on a single world, I mean, you only need to look at what was happening to the planet. They talk about how instead of being spherical, sorry, not planet, the moon, instead of being spherical, Titan was oblong. You know, it was like an egg.
Wow.
That's how much it was being pulled.
He said you're much more interesting than science class. Continue. Shout out to Lord Marcus. Salute.
Physics for life.
Good to see you there, by the way.
Absolutely. Continue, brother.
But yeah, if you take that massive, like, idea of a planet being pulled so much that it basically becomes egg-shaped, and you keep pulling, you come to the natural conclusion that you could rip a planet literally apart.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the gravitational force that requires? Can you even conceive of it? Because it happens to Io on a semi-regular basis. You want to know why Io in the real world is so volcanic? It's because it's got Ganymede, the biggest moon of Jupiter, and Jupiter, the biggest planet in the solar system, pulling on it, often in opposite directions. So it's consistently being pulled apart, and the activity that happens as a result is volcanic, explosive, and very volatile. You always have change on Io's surface because it's never able to sit still long enough to create solid landmarks and everything. Like, you have volcanoes that will pop up all the time because it's unstable as all hell. That is, not exactly going to be the same as what happens to Titan, because it's all an ocean. But if you want to conceive of how to destroy a planet,
There you go.
I mean, gravitational force to a single point is definitely one of the ways you could potentially do it. And it sounds crazy, and the amount of force that you'd need to do that is huge, but if there is a paracausal entity in the universe that has the weapons to do so, it's definitely the darkness. It's definitely the darkness. And they've used these gravity weapons before.
Yeah.
They used it on Yang Liwei with the, ship that basically birthed the Awoken. There's a whole bunch of stuff that indicates that they may have... there's theory, at least, that indicates they may have done that way back when with the Hive.
Yep.
They may originally have caused the ZCG, which is the theory, but that's, again, very much speculative theory, so don't grab it as though it's definite. Yeah, there is something that is totally destructive to a world that they could do. And I do not doubt that if Bungie wanted to destroy a world, that they've been dropping these lore bits throughout the years to hint at that possibility. This is one of their super weapons. This is what they could do.
I agree. Yeah, E, I think Titan's out of there, man. just put it out there.
It seems like the obvious choice. I mean, at least in when you say it that way, and it's like the moon and everything there, and it's also sitting next to... Now, okay, this is where a bad spin foil hat wants to kind of check a questionable thought with the spin foil hat.
Let's go.
So my brother and I were talking about the potential of the pyramid ships, and I did my random speculation video after talking to him for a little bit, and honestly, this is just one I wanted to run by. And again, the big thing about Savathun being always the trickster, and even I've listened to you say it as well, it's you can take a whole lot of what she says with a grain of salt, so everything always seems to be pretty questionable. But I was honestly wondering if potentially... the pyramid ships are coming. If there was any way, and again, it's always the question of, is the darkness actually an entity? And then that's always a big question as well. But if the bigger question I was wondering, and this is where we got into the whole, is D3 coming? What's the scale? How do you introduce, a darkness race and stuff like that? Was if the pyramid ships were actually, what is being shown on the radar is more, and this is just bad questioning, so you can laugh at me here in a second. But if the pyramid ships are actually coming as a way to, because the proximity and time frame when they're going to arrive also lines up if the pyramid ships are in some way actually Savathun coming to maybe land on the dreadnought, and they actually add the dreadnought in coming, say, in a fall expansion.
They're not Savathun. As simply as I can put it. Yeah,
break it down,
Mike.
Let's get that exclusive.
So yeah, it's something that a lot of people definitely speculated about at the beginning when we first saw them. But the appearance of the pyramid ship on Luna and Shadowkeep generally completely and utterly shattered any even tangible idea that was the case. It seemed pretty clear beforehand, and it was kind of unlikely, to be completely honest. But when it came down to it, even though Savathun is a trickster, and even though there are definitely places in which unexpected things can happen in Destiny, the relationship between the Hive and the Pyramid on Luna basically nullifies any idea that Savathun might be in the Pyramids. They are very much listed as being separate from them. And, Altars of Sorrow, for example, is a great way in which you can actually see the Hive physically trying to draw power from something that is not their own in the form of the nightmares, in the form of the darkness, So, yeah, trying to reach out as the Hive and study it has been one of their long ambitions, and they've only just really been able to do that because it was only ever activated by Eris. You can actually find a patrol where Toland says as much to you. So, yeah, not anything to do with Savathun, but keep an eye on her, because she's definitely worked with her machinations to get certain Hive closer to the pyramid and to sort of try and understand what's going on. she, in her own way, is trying to become a constant of the universe, right? She's trying to become trickery in a certain sense, and she's also trying to preserve secrets, and in that sense, become secretive herself. I don't know how best to explain it. You'd need to go and read the lore books that you get out of the Pit of Heresy. It's, you can find it... Oh, God, what's the name of the lore book? I'll find this in a second. But yeah, it's the one where it's going after Malkanth, and all her other shenanigans. I'll find this in a second. I know I will.
All good. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
She is definitely a pending threat.
Indeed. A pending threat still, and I wouldn't doubt that we'll see more of her as time goes on. The thing I would say about Savathun is I don't ever know if it will ever come to pass that we'll actually face her as a boss in-game.
Really?
You know?
Why you say that?
Because she's too smart to ever let herself be exposed. Right? Do you truly think that the god of trickery... I mean, it's like Loki, right?
Right.
Like Loki
That's what
and
actually
Thor.
brought it up when my brother and I were talking, because I said trickster, and he was thinking trickster like if, on that scale. So yeah, anyway, continue.
Inquisition of the Damned, by the way, that's the book.
Inquisition
That's the
of
book
the
you
Damned. Okay.
Got it.
But yeah, no. Even with all the stuff that she's trying to do, where she's effectively trying to become immortal in a certain sense, there is no way in which she's going to compromise herself so easily. She'll definitely want to go out there and acquire resources that will help her in her quest.
Right.
She'll want knowledge.
I don't know,
she wants
but
information.
Eris said she'll let her presence be known. We'll know when the move is. We got to be smart enough to catch it. That's what Eris said in that strike.
Indeed. The other thing to note as well is just the architecture of everything. Hive architecture and the architecture of the darkness is completely different.
Different, no, absolutely. Yeah, you're
And
right.
even with Savathun fleeing into the portal, into the singularity, near the end of the Book of Sorrow, saying we must grow apart and become different. I don't think there's enough of a connection. Having said that, writers have proven me wrong in the past, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, I would almost certainly bet that this is not Savathun. This is unquestionably something bigger. This is this is the darkness, and if there's any doubt in that whatsoever, it's got to be placed with something really solid as a foundation for it.
Are you feeling September expansion-y?
I think it's very much strong potential there. I feel as though this season is very much going to lead into that.
Right.
With that said, I mean, it's likely that they'll actually announce what's going on in September near the end of this season, right? Because, I mean, we can literally see the pyramid ships approaching, the gig's going to be up at a certain point. Like, they got to talk about this, right?
Skybox is going to change and be like, that's terrifying.
Yes.
That is a Dorito.
Indeed.
I want somebody to have that like cinematic and then just like go back and like Adobe and like put a Dorito fly in instead. That'll be beautiful.
It'll be hilarious. She'll look to send us in the chat.
So here's the question: if the darkness actually is potentially what's coming for grand scale adventure in September that we always tend to get for big expansion, what do you see as being? I don't want to say filler, but how do you connect? And again, this is where the disconnect of the story. Hopefully, they're getting better. How do you connect this season of the Worthy, the Almighty coming in, and then the Rasputin, which, by the way, you nailed. I listened to your video saying, hey, we're going to shoot these things up in the air, and that's literally what we started doing on Tuesday.
Yeah.
For the
Great explanation of the satellite. Yeah.
Yeah,
that was
the
a good video.
Seraph Tower event was like, you nailed that. But, like, how do you go from this and the Almighty to then September? What bridges that gap, or what would you like to see bridge that gap?
I'd like it to be the destruction of whichever world Bungie wants to destroy. Because, I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, they clearly start reaching the closer reaches of the system by the time that Season of the Worthy ends. And I think that's an easy way to cue us into the next expansion. But if they're coming along and Bungie needs to literally make space, there's no question that this next season will be about the darkness destroying a world. And the question is, do they want to go ahead and do a story about us trying to save that world? Or do they want to go ahead and portray utter desperation and us just trying to run? Because honestly, when it comes down to it, if they go after, say, Titan, we have assets in place on Titan, you know? You see an entire whole load of ships docked by the arcologies. And these aren't just, random junkers from back in the Golden Age that have seen wear and tear. These are actual, city skid... what's the term? It's not scud fighter, it's... they're basically fighters. Space fighters is effectively what they are. But, yeah, you see all of these assets lined up there, and it's like, we need to evacuate these. We need to get these we need to get these things out of here. And it's wise to assume that that's probably going to be a part of the story, is just evacuate anything off of whatever world it is that's going to get destroyed, try and stop the darkness, and realize it's probably not going to happen, Like, that's going to be the story, and it's going to be this first look at the desperation of what's going to happen in the system. And, the more we talk about it, the more I think it's going to be Titan, because Titan has consistently had these rumors of destruction going through it. Yeah.
I'm with you on that. Big time. Big time.
Yeah. History tends to repeat itself.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You, man. This is some deep lore, E. Some deep lore.
No,
man.
I know. I was like, I'm the next, and they even described it in the Vidoc back in June, just saying, hey, season 11, you're going to want to be there. And I mean, they're building it up to be
something crazy's going to happen.
Yeah, something crazy is absolutely going to happen.
All I would say, E, is I just hope that, and I know we talked about it before, whatever happens, I do think we need to feel a sense of loss, like a real, scary impending doom thing. We need to feel like when we lost Cade, we need to feel something. I would love for that to be portrayed cinematically, if possible. And let them know that this is what we got to deal with. And this is going to be a serious threat and theme throughout for a while. That would be really cool if they could pull that off.
Completely agree.
Absolutely.
So then the other question I wanted to ask then, because tying into the Dreadnought, and then my brother and I were talking and joking about the whole Dreaming City and the whole infinite loop and stuff, like, of what that could be empowering. Because I even think you said it recently of other places, but if that is not empowering Savathun, which I guess you were saying we don't actually know it is, what do you think? Do you think the Dreaming City loop, if that ever comes into play again, or is that stuck in limbo for good, or what is it going to take to actually get that thing out of its loop?
I don't know, to be completely honest. Here's the thing. Any speculation, past or present, with regards to the ability for us to break the loop that comes from Truth to Power, which is the main lore book attached to it all. It's don't trust Truth to Power. Any speculation that comes from that is unfounded, purely because of the fact that we're looking at something which is unproven, which potentially could be deception, and which, along with that, lies to us very deliberately throughout the entire process of the book. And it doesn't just do so once, it does so twice. It originally comes to us claiming that the book is from Eris, and then it comes to us claiming, after it gets caught out by our ghost, that it's a thing called Medusa, right? Basically an artificial intelligence. It then potentially hints that it's coming from Quoria, which maybe is directly linked to Savathun, maybe is not, which means it could be deceiving us, it could not be. Depends how much autonomy Quoria actually has. It's stated that it has the ability to potentially deceive Savathun. Oryx left as much, but it's not 100% clear that that's the case. And then at the very end of the book, it says that it's come from Eris again. And it's okay, I just can't trust what you're saying.
Unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so at the end of the day, any speculation you draw from it is really quite dangerous. In the process of it, you even go into what is literally spoken of in the lore book as a vivid hallucination. And it just goes to show, clearly someone is showing you these things, but they're probably showing them to you very deliberately. They're trying to plant ideas in your head. They're trying to do this. And any information we gain from that book, therefore, is very suspect. So don't trust Truth to Power is the number one thing I'd say. And as a result, on the note of the Dreaming City's loop, anything that it says that might break the loop, not guaranteed to be true. Best example of this, by the way, it talks about how you can get the true ending to the Dreaming City by completing Shattered Throne at 999.
Remember that?
We did that, and boy, oh boy, oh boy, did we get a message from Savathun from Bungie. Yeah, no. Whole point being, don't trust truth to power. Don't trust anything that comes from anyone even close to the Witch Queen. It's a load of it's a pocketbook of lies, dude. It's not worth it.
Yes, exactly. Oh my god, this is fun. Actually, a random question just had me think of something. In reference to, obviously, we know I'm an Osiris fan, but I gotta ask you something in reference to the Speaker. And this has been a point of contention for me when, obviously, his whole history from D1. Then D2 happens, we have the Gaul thing, we have the invasion and stuff like that. And, some information has come out in reference to his true connection, to the traveler
or
and
lack thereof.
Or lack thereof. I call it false profiting, but that's just me. He threw my guy out the tower, but this guy is literally a fraud himself. But anyway, moving along. My question is okay, obviously we lost him during the whole, the Red War and all that stuff. But my question is, why do you think the tower has not given someone else the mantle? Someone else has not taken up the mantle of Speaker. And even your ghost, when you scan his quarters, right, he says, I wonder who the next Speaker is going to be, or, to that nature. Why do you think that is? Because technically D1 was kind of founded. He was a central figure in D1. And now that he's gone, I'm actually surprised by that. What's your thought process on that?
So, to understand this, I think you need to understand kind of the governing structure of the city, which is that they have what is effectively a weird mix of an executive and a legislative body, right? Mm-hmm. There is a prime minister of sorts, which is the position that the Speaker holds. The Speaker is very much the head of state, as best as we can tell. But beyond that, the consensus is something that is both appointed and kind of elected. In order for a faction, in particular, because the Guardian posts of the Vanguard are set in the consensus, and they're, you basically get nominated to the Vanguard by various different processes. But when it comes to the factions, at very least, they'll get ascended because of their stature, right? Some of them are believed to have inappropriate ideas, but they have to have some kind of civilian backing for them to be ascended in the first place. It's part of the reason why the War Cult gets ascended over someone like, say, the Symmetry, after Lysander's faction, the Concordat, basically gets demoted.
The loot.
Yeah. So it's a weird mix of the principles of an appointed body alongside something that, technically speaking, has some kind of representative backing to it. It's not a true democracy, but by that same token, it has elements of a representative democracy. The important thing to know about this is that the main governing body of the city is still the consensus, which is made up of the major factions involved, as well as the Vanguard and the Speaker. Here's the thing. They've thus far been operating without the Speaker for a very long time, and you can see the first example of this in the lore tab of a sidearm called Peace by Consensus. You remember when the first faction rallies came out?
Yes.
They had one item shared among their loot pool, and it was this sidearm, Peace by Consensus. And it talks about how Zavala opens the first Vanguard meeting after the Red War has concluded. And I think it's either Hideo or Arak Shalal who says, doesn't the Speaker usually do that? And effectively, Zavala says, we'll manage without. And it's one of these things of saying, do we actually need a Speaker? The city does not have a constitution, as best I can tell. And it does not have many governing ideals, aside from the fact that the consensus is there predominantly to keep balance between citizens, the factions, and the Guardians, As a result, you're definitely looking at a system that has rules, but you're not looking at a system which has rules that are so set and so defined that there's, say, a vice speaker or an immediate need to search for a new speaker. This is very much an ad hoc governmental system. So it's weird to look at it like that, but ultimately you're looking at something that does not have... They're playing by the seat of their pants to a certain extent, They do have rules, but not so much structures, You'd think in a few hundred years they'd develop a constitution or something like that, but to the best of my knowledge, it doesn't exist. And as a guy who literally has a degree in politics, I'd be able to spot if it was there. But
no, glad for educating me on that, man. Because I was curious, and that does make sense. They kind of just They're doing
They
their
just
own
let
thing
it
now.
slide, right? They're
just-
doing
yeah.
everything.
Just doing their own thing, man. He's answering a lot of the questions I've always wanted to know, man. This is good, man. Real good stuff. And in reference to you personally, what about just in general? Like, obviously, we know your YouTube channel. You know, this is your passion. You love lore. You love this stuff. You're fantastic at it. And what about a dream scenario? What if Bungie approached Lord Bife and said, "We want you on the narrative team. Official job posted. Would Lord Bife consider this job?"
No, and here's why.
Woo! Let's get it.
Here's
Let's
why.
Get it.
Here's why.
Let's get it.
Because they do not want me, and they do not want me because I am not qualified. Here's the
Okay.
big misconception.
Let's talk.
And I'm so glad that you brought this up because I need to go ahead and stand in Bungie's corner for a second and fight what
Let's
is
get it.
honestly the biggest misconception. Everybody sits there and says, why won't you just put Mylin and Bife on the narrative team? They can clearly tell a better story. People who say that are ignorant and
Idiots.
stupid, and I'm going to tell you why exactly right now. Because if you've ever enjoyed one of our pieces of content, you clearly have not read the story if you then think that it's a reflection of bad storytelling by Bungie. I will grant you, narrative occasionally has a problem when it comes to piecing together cutscenes. We've talked about the flow of continuity not being perfectly there. But when it comes down to the actual lore and the writing, you do not want me on the narrative team because I am nowhere near as good as so many of the other previous writers that they have had. Right? I can barely hold a light. I can barely hold a torch to them. So the important thing to understand about this is that all I am doing is I am making the story more approachable. Now, that is not necessarily to say that that isn't a lesson that Bungie could learn. Because,
Right, that's a skill.
you know,
That's a skill,
especially...
You should be the consultant for how the
You,
story
you,
is
could- you
delivered.
could be a consultant now, Bife. We ain't gonna shortchange you. You're showing reverence and respect, which is correct. But I
Like-
do want to say that there is the theme and why casuals sometimes run away from Destiny is because they don't have that understanding like that you have. Like you have that understanding of these great writers, these great stories, right? And you adapt it in such a way that it's easy to understand for the casual gamer who doesn't know what's going on. So what about like a consultant role in reference to that?
I'd consider a consultant role, but beyond all of just that, it's, you know, I sit there and I like to think that as my position in the community, it's not something that at least with Bungie, it's not something where I'd necessarily ask for it to become part of a job, you know, because that creates a conflict of interests. If I'm consulting them on something where the story goes, or a way in which they can deliver the story, that then directly conflicts with the fact that I am trying to tell it. You know, I'm trying to, and for the best part, when it comes down to it, I will keep spoilers away from my audience like it's me trying to hide kids from the plague. You know,
I respect
like,
that big time.
I
by the
respect
way.
that. I respect
That's
like,
huge.
you know, when it comes down to it, it's one thing to understand what's happening. It's another thing entirely to know where it's going.
Facts.
And I try to limit that second part where appropriate. And like, yeah, sure, there are going to be moments where, in order to prevent my audience being spoiled, I will deliberately spoil myself, and I'll make sure that we know what to look for. Like, it's actually something that my mods do really well in the Discord server that we run. We have basically embargoes on any spoilerish kind of details, and I will arm them with the knowledge that they need to cut that stuff out as quickly as they can, so that we don't spoil the average passerby. But ultimately, that, you know, it all speaks to the bigger responsibility of being a part of this community. Like, yeah, sure, it's my job. I make money from it. It's how I pay my bills and it's how I pay my taxes. Like, totally fair enough. And a consulting job would be most certainly an honor. And, you know, even something where, similar to what Mylin did, you know, where he sat down with them and made a grimoire. Like, I think opportunities like that have potential. But my biggest priority is to always make sure that I'm serving the community well and that there is no conflict of interest. And when it comes to being on the narrative team, definitely the case. When it comes to consulting job, probably the case. And
Seeing
beyond
behind
all
the
of just
curtain would
that,
kind of ruin your fun too. I feel like.
Yeah, kind of. And this leads back into the last thing. I really like my job. Like, my job has stressful moments, granted, and I work really, really hard, but I don't know if I'd trade this job for anything, you know? Like, I have an amazing career path that I've, trotted along thus far, and I have no idea where it goes from now, but, it's been the craziest opportunity of my entire life, and... I owe a lot of it to the fact that Bungie has a fantastic narrative team, Like, there are, there's clearly a lot of people coming along. Nearly 800,000 people kind of by the subscription, by proxy, are saying, yeah, we think that the story is
like
worth
what you're
investing
doing.
our time
They kind of...
Would you like to know more as the...
Salute.
Oh, God, what's it called? Oh, God, yeah, whatever. Point being, like, everybody is invested, and... I want to make sure that I take that kind of responsibility forward, and if that means that I get offered a job, I think about that very carefully, because much as it is very much my ability to make money that would end up being impacted by that, possibly positively, possibly negatively, there is a bigger thing that I want to always consider, and that is going to be the community no matter what comes up. Like, at the end of the day, it is... yes, Starship Troopers, by the way.
The chat is going in on Starship Troopers. I love the chat right now. Yes.
Thank you to Czar Commander. But yeah, no, responsibility to the community is a really big thing for me. So that's kind of where I sit on that one. Along with the fact that, again, I'm just not qualified for that stuff. Like, I'm a good orator and I'm a good storyteller in terms of my ability to take someone's narrative and to make it digestible. I am not someone you want writing that narrative.
Fair enough.
I am not someone you want writing it because I'm untested. I have not made my own stories thus far. I have never made a story. Much as some people say that I literally write the lore and people recruit me alongside Bungie being like, what are you doing? Like, that still astounds me that people get that misconception. But point being, no. There's a bigger responsibility there, and I'm not the kind of guy that you want writing the story anyway. You want someone qualified, They've had great writers in the past. Seth Dickinson, Jill Shaw, Mallory, God, I forget her name, but yeah, Z is the shorthand for her. Like, there's so many fantastic writers on the team who have come and gone and who have done great things for the world of Destiny, and yeah, I do not stand among their ranks, and rightly so, because I'm nowhere near as talented as they are. So yeah,
the chat's
the answer to that question.
Like,
the chat's calling you the chronicler.
Yeah, the chronicler. Yeah, that makes sense. my brother asks, is like, if approached by Audible, would you narrate books?
Yes. That I would
There
do,
we
no
go.
questions asked.
Nice.
As long as the pay is good.
That's right. Make sure the check is right.
Right?
I was like, because
Oh,
I
God.
think you would be a very popular narrator. Be like, what does he narrate?
Oh, yeah.
10 books. Sold.
Soul. Who doesn't want to hear Bife's amazing voice over, Destiny themes and great story? Oh, that'd be amazing. I think that would be cool too. Absolutely. That's what I got, E, man. You want to touch anything else? Or you want to jump right into the
There's a couple of questions. There's one I did want to ask, though.
Yes, please, go.
So, shout out to WD Prescott as well. One of
Prescott.
he said, with the darkness ships coming close to the grave of the First Fleet, he said, do you have any speculation what asset Marasov asked the Nine to move there?
I honestly have no idea, but I'm glad that people remember that. I really am. Because there's potential for it to play a really big part in the future story. And there's a few assets that the Nine have out in that vicinity generally. If anybody has read, I believe it's The Gateway. I need to double check on it. But again, in Stolen Intelligence, there is talk of how the Nine basically commandeered a portal and used it to create life. And because the Nine are basically dark matter incarnate, right? And they attempted to commune with us by sending through first just a few protein molecules, then a single-celled organism that died immediately, then, something which effectively was a larger multicellular organism that again died immediately, then something which had lungs but nowhere to create oxygen, which was metabolized into a bloodstream, and they were slowly trying to get better and better and better at creating life. And, there's all sorts of other crazy stuff out there in the reef. Like, the grave of the First Fleet and all these other different places, they're potentially filled with opportunities for weird story moments like that. Like, Yeah, there's cool things out there. You just need to go ahead and search for them.
What else you got, E?
And then he also asks, he's like, the last lore entry on Bungie.net is the ominous parting of Osiris and Saint. He said that Toland has been left unchecked for too long. What do you think is causing concern for Osiris to mention that?
Well, so
laugh was classic.
I'm with Osiris on this one. I'm perpetually concerned about Toland. I've been concerned about Toland since the end of Taken King.
Yes.
Right? Like, I've sat there and always known that the man has an affinity for darkness, and with the darkness approaching, the possibility of Toland trying to commune with it directly is very high. And Toland was a guardian at one point, even though he was exiled for madness. So, that's effectively enemy intelligence. Beyond all of that, though, there is the potential big hive problem that's going on, which I don't think is one that will rear its head. But Toland has continuously told us, congratulations, you've killed the king, but you need to go into his throne world to kill him. That will leave a vacancy within the Hive Majesty. It will mean that their monarchy is unfulfilled. Do let me know if a vacancy opens up. So he's maybe that's a joke, maybe it's not, but he's constantly been kind of posturing for this place.
Yes.
And he even has, even though it's small and kind of pathetic, a small outcropping in the Ascendant Realm. He's carved out his own sword space there. So it's very clear that he's getting better at being a practitioner of the darkness. And with all of that, there is a bigger problem that comes with it, because he effectively will stop caring about our struggle when he has the avenue to become powerful enough to fill all those spaces himself.
I agree.
So if he ever becomes more powerful, I think he could be the Joker to our Batman. Which I think is a fantastic narrative arc that Bungie could pull.
Oh, that'd be fire.
But yeah, what I'd love to see as well, and this maybe is a way in which they could potentially approach a Savathun story in which she is mortal. Have Toland throw down against Savathun with some kind of trickery himself. Like, if there's somebody who could be a wild card in that, I think that it could be Toland.
Yeah. Speaking of wild cards, I gotta ask, you just got me thinking. Good old Daddy Calus. Daddy Calus, man. I mean, he's just popping up here and there, and we had the raid, we had the gotcha moment at the end of the raid at the Lavender Leviathan. You know what I'm saying? But and since then he's been on the fringes still, communicating with us, wanting us to grow fat from strength, and then we had the Chronicon and all this stuff. So he's an interesting figure, and I am very curious to see how Bungie handles him moving forward. What's your thoughts on Calus for the future of Destiny and his role on things?
That's a very interesting question. I think that it's going to tie into his daughter and the story of the Cabal overall. If anybody has grinded out enough medals, they may already have the heir apparent heavy machine gun. And if you've read the lore tab on that, you've basically seen that his daughter, Keitel, who rebelled against him and exiled him during the Midnight Coup along with
Why
Gaul.
is everybody exiling? What is going on in the Cabal structure?
Dude, they literally had a grand coup. It's part of the reason why it's such a big event, Midnight Coup's not just a hand cannon, it's a thing that happened. So Gaul and maybe 8 other conspirators, I think it is, basically got together. And these are conspirators through all sorts of different levels of government, and some of them not. Calus's random tea merchant that was found at the end of one of the streets that he loved to stroll through the, capital Torobatl. That's, that was one of the conspirators. His own daughter was a conspirator. The Evercut general, primus of all legions, Umuna Rath, was one of the conspirators. Gaul and the consul were 2 of the conspirators. I can't remember who it is.
Prescott is on fire in the chat.
I don't think is it Otsot? I feel like it's Otsot. It's the Imperial Dreamer. She was a scion who basically let them all communicate. These are all conspirators, and they all exiled Calus. And as a result, the Cabal have been sort of left in this weird split. You know, you have Calus, who went on his diaspora with his followers and his attendants, and then came back and has started gaining followers from the Cabal that have slowly parted ways with the Red Legion. And then you have the rest of the Empire, which seemingly is still ruled by the Red Legion, has influence from Keitel at this point, because she's one of the only standing likely heirs to the entire thing. You know, she's Calus's heir, even if she didn't go onto the Midnight Coup. And she stood with Gaul, which means that she is the likely ruler now that Gaul is dead. So I think that's where the story is going. I think that those two characters will come to a head, and then we will have to deal with the Cabal as a whole. You know, I feel like, just in the same way that I feel Mithrax will be one of the characters that is a capstone to that race's story, I think that Keitel and Calus will be capstones to the Cabal's story as a race.
Interesting. Yeah,
So, yeah.
I've always liked the Cabal. It's just an interesting storyline. I just very. There's a lot of threads there, and I'm very curious to see what. So I'm glad you answered that. Interesting, man. What you got, E?
Oh, it's like, just when it comes to like the races, as we're talking about the Cabal, it's like, I feel like the scale of the races and some of the stories we've had, it always kind of jumps around. And when we go and you're talking about Mithrax for a capstone for a fallen story arc or something that could be, and then you have Cabal getting a little bigger. If you were to rank like the threat level or grand scale of each race, like, I don't want to speculate, so like, how would you rank the races that we're facing? Obviously darkness being question mark number 5. Where would you put them on either threat level or how big these stories can be? Because if we have the darkness coming in, you know, potentially in like 6 weeks, they're going to be here in, you know, a few fortnights, and then they show up, then if you take this big departure to this, you know, more, you know, Terran level fallen storyline, like jumping between those, but I was still just curious, like, where do you rank the threats of each race? How do you put them in scale?
I don't know if I would rank them in terms of threat, but I would rank them in terms of power. And the reason I say that is because races like the Fallen may actually end up being allied with us in the end. You know, especially with Mithrax and the House of Light. There's a lot of implications that that's where the story is going. Mithrax appears to be sort of, if Mithrax is to the Arbiter as the Fallen are to the Elites. You know,
That's a
like,
great analogy. Yeah.
to compare Halo and Destiny.
Yep.
But
Good Halo reference.
But yeah, when it comes down to it, Fallen are definitely the least powerful unless Mithrax is somehow chosen by the Traveler, which implies that he could gain some of the powers of the light. But until that happens, they're very much bottom of the barrel. They are scavengers, they're holding on. Following up after that, you have to rate it by causal or paracausal ability. And following that, there's definitely the Cabal, who are a mighty star empire, but they're also a failed state to a certain extent now. We've killed lots of their leaders. They have consistent command problems because of that. Whether it's us killing Gaul or Valkaur, or whether it's you know, or whether it's Kargan from the Insight Terminus, we have consistently gone through and killed their commanders. And as a result, we just keep on lopping off the heads of this Hydra, and it feels like it's genuinely starting to run out of heads. You know, Calus and Keitel are becoming the figureheads of each respective faction, it looks like. And with all of that, there's this big move now towards, well, what do they do next? And at the moment, it feels like they're stagnant. And that's very much deliberate on the part of the storytelling for the sake of trying to set them up for the next big encounter with them, I think. After that, there's the Vex. They are not a paracausal threat like the Hive or the Darkness or the Light, but they are most certainly still dangerous. They have, you know, abilities of prediction that sometimes are able to surpass Darkness and Light. And we saw that in Curse of Osiris, you know. The Vex that you found out on Mercury were able to actually find a future timeline that they were then trending the world towards, in which they were then able to destroy both the light and the darkness. And there's even a lore tab of something that makes commentary saying that that fate is worse than even being ruled by darkness, because whilst darkness despises life generally, it still admits the permission of strong life. You know, some life does persist. With the Vex, it's the case of only the pattern can exist. And so they're a constant existential threat. But as the Vault of Glass will always say, Guardians make their own fate. So, you know, we are constantly able to overpower them. Paracausality is the key. And that's the reason why before the darkness, the Hive will always be the number one threat that we need to take a look at. Like, darkness will always be top of the pile, but before we face darkness, that number 2 slot will always be the Hive.
Yeah.
You know, they have the ability to use dark powers. They have consistently been able to use paracausality to their advantage. The Taken King was a literal god. None of this pretend nonsense from the Fallen Splicers. None of this stuff where it was just, you know, a god in metaphor alone. No, Crota and Oryx, in a very literal sense, were gods. And we have faced nothing quite like them since. This will, like, the darkness will honestly be the biggest test that we have, I think, since Oryx, in terms of a narrative sense, you know? Like, yeah, everybody can go ahead and talk about how Riven tricked Oryx, but ultimately her powers were, you know, it kind of pales in comparison to the accolades of Oryx, right?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
this is a guy who literally brought with him an entire new enemy race in gameplay terms, and he gained that enemy race by killing a god and stealing its power and the secret of how to create that, and then communing with the darkness, you know? Like,
Absolutely.
And he still may not be, quote, completely gone, right? Because his heart is not completely found or something like that with the...
it depends on what... It depends on what's happened to the Touch of Malice, yeah, but...
That's the weapon I was trying to remember, yeah.
We shall see, we shall see.
Yeah, man. What I got. Want to jump into what's going on, unless you got some more stuff?
I mean, we could probably do this forever, which is not fair to you.
Which is not fair to
so, yeah, no. So it's like just asking forever. But no, it's like, as for what's going on in the world of Destiny itself, of course, we know you're like the lore master, but you'll kick the crap out of a lot of people in Crucible and raid with the best of them. So you play the game as much as you know more than most of us about it, which is impressive. And obviously, we know we got a pretty big TWAB this week with relation to like trials and stuff like that. But we did have the big event kickoff this week, so I just kind of wanted to see about the whole Guardian Games activities. If you guys are playing it, if you got the machine gun already, if you did, then you grinded like hell too. Just kind of curious how your thoughts of Guardian Games have been for both of you guys this week of everything we've been playing.
I mean, we gotta ask Bobby first. We gotta ask our esteemed guest.
Nah,
How you feeling?
You go for it. You go
I
ahead.
go for it. Listen, I listen. It's a light event, but I like the thought behind it. I like the, you know, because let's be real, Destiny has always had this intrinsic little ribbing and beefing with each other from a class that, you know.
We do it all the time.
We do it all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like I get excited you're wrong because I finally have a Warlock by my side.
Oh yeah, no, I may as well just step out.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's always been that, you know, and I call it that class pride, right? You know, why you choose that character. You know, Pipe, you beautifully explained why we kind of share similar things. For me, I've always taken kind of like the warrior or the brutish clash and most, but it was something about the character creation screen and seeing that Warlock and holding the ball of power or energy, whatever he's commanding, and it kind of grew to me, gravitated towards that. So I like the idea of this. I think it's cool. It's almost like an Olympic feel. Each day you put in your weapon, you know, you put in your medals. You know, now they having us do a lot of varied things, which is, you know, which is cool. But you know, at the end of the day, some I think are a little too specific. Like, because I think shout out to the Attunement of Hunger thing that's not working.
God,
that doesn't work. That doesn't freaking work.
Bro.
Yeah.
I was like, you know, it's just one of those things that like, you know, I like sometimes to just stay in a subclass here and there. But now I'm like switching all the time. I gotta be a Dawnblade, I gotta be this just to get certain things done. I think the spirit of it is cool. You know, it's a fun little thing. So first of all, I gotta give them props on this. Shout out to the class item. Because finally, that Warlock,
You guys have...
Finally, we have a bond that pops, dude.
Yes.
Oh.
Finally.
It only took like 6 years.
We finally have something like ornate and bombastic that we can feel proud of. Not this little circle around the arm and nothing else going on. Like, this is what I want to see, you know? And I hope this is the direction moving forward for Warlocks especially. But, yeah, man, like, look, I know what it is. It's like a filler event, but I do think it is fun. The spirit of it is fun. Checking every day. You know, Titans right now are killing it. You know, okay, shout out to you guys that killed it. Hunters had the big lead initially.
Look, I will simply say this, man. I'm okay with Titans winning and Warlocks coming second as long as we collectively, as a coalition, make sure the Hunters come third. We cannot let the hunters win, okay?
You can't let the hunters win.
I like the word choice of coalition there. I appreciate that.
Yes. Yes.
We are working
Shout out.
together on this one, for
Yeah,
sure.
man. But overall, like I said, I want to get that. I want to get that gun. I saw some videos on. I think shout out to Calus. Shout out to Cross. I was watching their videos on it. It looks really good once it's charged up, and you get that little arc shield, kind of going on behind it. So I'm looking forward to getting that. To me, this is filler content between season stuff. I'm not gonna get too crazy, but so far, liking it. So far, where you at with it, Bife?
I think that the spirit of the competition is good. I think that when it comes down to it, like, I've seen a lot of people very fondly embracing their class. And yeah, sure, we talk about, like, coalition against the hunters, but it's all in good faith. Like, you talk about, like, the friendly ribbing between classes, yeah. Like, we're all basically jostling for position, and that's fine. Like, it happens. That's all good. I think the problem with it ultimately comes down to the fact that it is just basically do 7 bounties every day, and that's kind of it. Like, yeah, sure, there's a few cool triumphs in there. The exotic is unquestionably going to be really nice to get. The class items, I've heard good things about them. The ghosts, oh my god, I love my new bird ghost, dude.
You guys win the ghost battle. I'm gonna get the lion is decent, but the flying gold bird is immaculately done. So good.
Yes.
So just chef's kiss.
And
Like,
and the perks on them, you got both guiding light and speed demon. The only thing it needed is combo detector, but at least you've got ghosts that people are going to use too, which is good. I was worried about that.
Absolutely. And I feel as though if they really want to do this, they need to go ahead and give an event like this a bit more flesh, so to speak. It's like, I'm fine with the concept behind having a rivalry between classes and then, having this repeat year on year. I think that if you're going to go ahead and do this again, it's got to have more to it. I do also understand, and this is something I think can be said about the entire season, this season is lighter.
Oh, yeah,
I think that from a perspective of development, considering what's going on, I think that that's okay. And I don't want to go ahead and give Bungie a free pass on stuff, because again, like, we should hold people to high standards. If something doesn't fit and if something doesn't work, that's okay. But if this means that the team has more time to develop the next big expansion that's coming along, and if, generally speaking, it provides people with a season where they can put the game down and take a break from it for a bit, I think that's actually really good and really healthy. Like, don't get me wrong, I still play Destiny a lot and I grind, but most of the time I have one season that I sort of take everything on the back burner. And for me, that was Season of Dawn. That was last season, I barely got to... I barely got to season rank 200 on my pass, and I grinded out those levels just so I could get the triumph.
Barely like, 200. I just barely got to 200.
I love that light grinding.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. Like, I lost Sector Goblined my way through that, I went full Gremlin for about a couple of hours at the end of the season. And then I just got my, 100 levels so I could get my 20 power on the artifact, and then I was done. Like, I didn't play a lot. I took a nice break during the winter time. I didn't make as many videos on things, and it wasn't exactly like a full holiday, but it was one of those moments where I was able to not burn out on the game. And that was really important, Absolutely. So I sat there and I was like, yeah, I'm going to take this moment to cool down, just let things go, and then I'll be refreshed and ready for the next season. And, for some people, that's actually a really healthy choice, is stepping away. Like, I think this is also a mentality that people need to get into. It's nice to know that we can come back to Destiny every week and there's probably something new. That's really good. But I think people also need to grapple with the idea that it's okay to step away occasionally. Like, yeah, sure, if content in the game sucks, that's bad. Like, the state of trials right now is pretty unacceptable. And the fact that we're... the state of trials is pretty unacceptable, and the fact that content delivery has basically kind of fallen on its face is really sad to see. But by that same token, if we're looking at content generally, we don't want this thing to completely consume our lives all the time. Like, we do want moments where we can put this down. And, I get the need for content. I get that it's irritating sometimes when you see people screaming that the game is dead. But at the end of the day,
so not dead.
There's a moral need for endpoints in games. right? Like there is a moral need for people to be able to put a game down and say, I've had my fill for the moment, and walk away and do something else. You know, and whether that's another game, or whether it's just spending time with your family, whether it's reading a good book, whether it's making yourself some good food, whether it's going to sleep, you need to have endpoints. And having something that is all-consuming is good sometimes, but not all the time. As with anything, it is about moderation. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really neat that we can come back and find something new practically every week. That's pretty damn cool. I love that. But it shouldn't feel like a chore. Like, that's the important thing.
Yeah,
How,
and that's
how you like it, E? How you like
Chris-
the games, man?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm reading
Sleepers for
Crystal
the week.
Hydralisk.
Oh, because, yeah. on
Sleepers for the
fire.
week, brackets. I'm very weak. I'm
very
very weak. Crystal Hydralisk.
Salute, man.
No, we've talked
How you
about
feel
that
about it?
before, too. Just with the
Yeah.
needing to take a break and the way the seasons are built and stuff. It's like if yours was with Dawn, mine's been somewhat this season as well. But I feel like some of these seasons have people feel like, oh, I just got to play it all the time. As a lot of them are saying in the chat, it's like Prescott. It's like you are not obligated to play this game, even though sometimes we feel like it, and it's kind of nice that I think people are starting to get these revelations in some of these seasons that like. This is a little lighter. Cool, I can breathe. I can go see the outdoors for a minute, which is something we all definitely have to do. So,
or hit the backlog.
sunlight.
Exactly, dude. Like, here's the thing. I literally do this stuff as part of my job. No one else, unless they're like a content creator of some stripe, should feel obligated to throw as many hours into this as I do, you know? Like, I play Trials every week so I can get my one win so that I can make sure that I'm still getting the lore book. Sometimes I'll go flawless. Sometimes I'll get some wins. Like, that's always cool. I love that. But, you know, I'm still obligated to go ahead and play for some base reasons. And, you know, that's about it, man.
Yeah, fair enough, man. I'm with you, Bife. I'm with you on that. What else we got? The Twabby, man.
I mean, yeah, Guardian games. They did say one thing about Guardian games. Just if you guys are trying to go for your class, that the final week is going to be double points. So if the Crayon Eaters do hold it up for a little while, don't slack off in the final week. Just saying. But Trials, yeah, that was the big piece, and they said Trials and Tribulations was the main topic of. They've got different things they're going to talk about as they go through versus the seasonal model and stuff like that. So they've got some pretty important TWABs coming up, so definitely stay tuned in coming weeks. This one they talk about the problems that are facing Trials, and they've been listening to community feedback, and a lot of people are like, hey, this, that, the other, so many lists of things, like, you guys aren't doing anything. They are listening. I guarantee the community game managers are gathering stuff every day, taking to the teams, trying to process this stuff. Just nothing happens overnight. Development cycles take time, and of course we know between being locked at home and working on 6 other things, they're slightly busy. But they said the main 3 problems in Trials of Osiris itself are as follows, and they've actually proposed a couple solutions, so I want to kind of take it one at a time with each of you guys. So the first one is the token reward incentivizes players to farm 3 wins and reset their card. Solution in Season 11, coming next, but it is 6 weeks away. We're planning on creating token payout milestones at 3, 5, and 7 wins that give successfully larger chunks of tokens. Bonus tokens passage should increase these payouts, and on Flawless Run, it will generate a significant token payout. So, first thoughts on that between both of y'all.
I want some numbers on that. Because I want to know that it's going to be enough. You know, like if people are going flawless with that stuff, that's great. I'd love it if teams would actually go to their 7 wins. But we need to know that the maths is there, because otherwise it's... They need to take into account that people will get 2 tokens per bounty, right? Per repeatable. And those repeatables can be accomplished very fast. So unless you're looking at, say, maybe 20 tokens for this payout for Tier 3, and then successively more and more and more, you still have the same problem.
So what do you think, like, the Flawless chest should off? Like, what numbers would you like to see? What's a good number for you?
Oh, dude, from the Flawless one, I'd say 80 to 100 tokens.
There we
Not
go.
even kidding. Like, you get 5 legendaries out of that from Saint 14. That'd be aight. I mean, consider that you also have all of the others from the previous ones. Let's say it's 20, 40, 60 from 3, 5, and 7, respectively. You're looking at a significant haul of stuff there, and it will definitely feel like your time has been invested. Similarly, take a look at what happens in Nightfalls, dude. Like, you have legendaries dropping all the freaking time in Nightfalls, and you'll come out of that, and, you know, you'll only have your one pinnacle or your one powerful, but, you know, you've got all of these random legendaries that you've done. You've probably gotten a lot of tokens that you can turn into Zavala, and if you're going to go ahead and give the parity of tokens, yeah, you then probably have a similar number of, probably have a similar number of weapons or pieces of armor that you could get. And beyond all of that, with a single activity, with a very limited set of stuff, it means that everybody gets to share a bit in the wealth, you know? Right. So there is less of a stress of trying to go ahead and get that one roll, you know? Like, if you give everyone the ability to jump in and grab that stuff more effectively, I think it helps the problem overall. Admittedly, more people are going to have their god roll Astral Horizons, but by that same token, when they have their god roll Astral Horizons, it also takes the farmers out of the queue. So it does solidify the meta around strong weapons again, but, you know, you're still looking at something where you don't have people, like, being stomped into oblivion by this stuff.
Yeah, stomping it on the 3-win guys.
This guy,
you know,
1 to 2, and being like, oh, it looks nice up there. How is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I'll sit there and I'll say this. I think that my, like, 80 to 100 tokens is very optimistic. Like, that's incredibly optimistic, and I think it'll probably be something closer to 50. But they need to get those numbers right, is the important point. You know,
absolutely.
Like, if they don't have enough incentives from all of that, then you have a big problem.
Completely agree.
You've
gotta
incentivize
it. Yeah, has to be incentive for going the length of the card and that nice payout. Completely agree.
It's like the time investment too. When you compare that, you can run Nightfalls really fast in comparison to a full Trials card, good, bad, or otherwise. Whether you go 7 or, you know, you get the Mercy and you go 8. 8 Crucible matches, just loading into them alone takes a little while for matchmaking. And Nightfalls you can do over and over and over. And if you farm those, about as fast as a Crucible match for some if they're good. So no, it's like it needs the parity between the two to be a lot more even. So hopefully they hit that one.
The highest tier 2, which I think we'll talk about in a sec.
Yep. Problem 2. Trials is unrewarding for players stuck at 1 to 2 wins. Solution: create a weekly bounty that encourages participation each weekend and does not require match wins. When redeemed, the bounty will reward the same item that comes from the 3-win passage, unlocking the engram for purchase that week.
Did someone say bounty?
You seem excited, Cognito. Do you have an opinion?
Did someone say bounty? I mean, I just remember talking about this and using the expression, if it wasn't broke, you know what I'm saying, don't fix it. And this was literally what I was so happy to see. Like, you have no idea, because again, and we had talked about it last word, which was, you know, one of the things that really incentivizes someone who is either a casual or not the greatest PvP, because I'm not the greatest. I'm a very average player. I remember playing D1, and I would go to, you know, Vance, and you get those bounties from him, and a lot of it was more about getting kills as a, you know, fire team, or individual things that just made you participate, that wasn't required for wins, right? And I'll never forget when I got my first Doctrine of Passing. Right? And that helped me so much it really gave me confidence that I can compete. I had a kind of meta weapon, you had a semi-decent role, and these are the things you have to incentivize the guys who are not the greatest PvPers or hardcore, but if just by their participation, they're incentivized, okay, just to continue to keep going. Because no one likes to get pub stomped 110 before 3 wins, and then you can't even cash the tokens in and do anything with it. So to me, this is huge. I really like that they're bringing the bounty system back in addition to it. And I want your thoughts on the whole thing, you know, what you see in this, you know, second point as far as their problem and their solution to it. But yeah, with the bounty.
I think they need one more bounty. I think they should have one which is, and both of them should be guaranteed pieces of gear, by the way, or at very least should unlock that potential piece. I think they should have a bounty that not only does what they're going to do, but also a bounty that awards something for 3 wins, but not 3 wins back to back or 3 wins on the same card. Just 3 wins.
3 wins. Okay.
You can get them at any point in time. You know, I think that's an important one, not only because it adds as another multiplier and something that helps you get past that first hurdle and rewards you for putting in the time of 3 wins worth of games. But also, if you see that you have won 3 times throughout the card, or throughout your cards at that point, even if sometimes you've lost, it's an incentive to say, like, hey, you can do this. You can get 3 wins. And you know what? You probably could get them back to back, or at very least on the same card. Like, it's not impossible. It can happen. So I feel like that's another important one that they should add. And I think the other division they need to do is make one of those worth armor and one of them worth weapons. You know, subdivide it so that you've got an equal ability to access the pool of loot every week.
Yeah, enough. E, what was your thoughts when you saw the bounty return?
Oh no, I mean that's the type of thing for me. Whether, I mean, as you said, the 3 wins is good. Or it could also be an accumulation of like rounds, because you may not win the full match, but if you actually pull out some rounds that you can eventually get there, would be, it just gives incentive for the player base to attempt it, even for a lot bigger skill range of like, hey, the upper echelon's in there. Well, maybe I can jump in. We get this one match. We put it together. Even unfortunately for them, it might be the ones where they put their supers together and get a chance to like go off. They can still have that way to get in there, practice, face those more higher skilled players, and just get a chance to get in there more frequently. So the bounties, I'm very happy to see those coming back. We've talked about them, of course, so it's not anything. But yeah, either wins, rounds, however they do it, that incentivization for a much broader skill range to get some benefit from it is huge.
Good to see. Got the next problem.
Trials feels unrewarding compared to other in-game activities. We kind of touched on this, but a solution, inject more chances to earn masterworking materials from trials. Masterworking/infusion materials will come from 3, 5, 7 win payouts in Season 11. We're also possibly looking at adding new material-focused farming card in Season 12.
Which is a good idea. Like a very good idea, because if people want to run Nightfalls constantly over and over again for the chance at not just the exotics, but also the Ascendant Shards, the Enhancement Prisms, and lower tier ones like the 970 Nightfalls, the Enhancement Cores, why not make a card that also incentivizes that? There are players who will just play it casually, and then there are PvP gods who run it all week and get their first flawless in their first run, no matter what, and then they just want to go back into the playlist and play over and over and over again. Give them a parity of reward. I'm really glad to see them do this. I think what they should do is they should tie Ascendant Shards to 7 wins instead of to Flawless. Because if you complete a Grandmaster Nightfall, you will get shards every time you do it. If you get Flawless, you get 1 shard. And I think that will then help create parity. And also, it's better reward even if you don't go Flawless, which helps with the population of the playlist.
I agree. I'm with you on this, Bike, 100%. We couldn't have said it better. I'm in agreement with Bike. What you got, Gay?
Oh, no, I mean, you pretty much nailed it. Just the fact that...
Yeah, he nailed that.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, incentivizing the end game with more things, be it masterworking. And, of course, there's a discussion of other things, which we'll get to here in a second, as he says. For example, you may be asking, what about adept weapons? We're currently investigating a new form of flawless award weapons for a future season. Now, this is where it says a future season, so big question there. They might not have the same name, but these weapons would have some differences in order to set them apart. Right now, we are currently looking at giving these weapons the ability to replace the weapon mod slot with an adept mod slot. Name may change, that can accept custom-built mods in addition to the normal list of weapon mods. All of this is subject to change as we continue to develop, but would want to give you an early look. We'll show more details in the future. So just the concept of an adept weapon mod slot, a way to set it up. What do you guys like that versus the intrinsic perk of, say, adept weapons having celerity just intrinsically on it? Which way would you like to see it to go? What do you think?
I'll jump in. I think this is fine. Obviously, the community has been screaming adept weapons for the longest. We need more flawless, incentive. That was, again, something that existed in D1. It was a level of, proving to the hardcore, you have something special, you've accomplished something, and it incentivizes you to go for the 7, which is then, not let you penalize and gang up on the 3-win guy. Now, for the mod thing, this is interesting. I like it. I just want to see if there will be more mods aside from, like, celerity, right? Because celerity, we agree, I believe, that it's a great perk that should have probably been intrinsically on the weapon as an adept weapon, right? Because it's something that you will only use in trials. You'll have increased handling, blah, 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 whatever the perk gives you that is specific to the mode. What I want to know is, if you remember in D1, there were certain trials armor pieces that maybe helped you revive a little quicker. There were certain other little things that were very trial specific, and I want to know if they're going to expound upon that with other mods that are trial specific that you may be able to interchange. I'm very curious to see how they handle that. They're being secretive right now for good reason, but I kind of like it. I think it has some potential. I want to know where you are at with this, because I just feel the community, the hardcore community, we need adept weapons and we need something special. And I think they may have some potential with this mod slot thing. Where are you at with this?
I think that Celerity, as it stands, whilst it's built really well for the idea of it being on the last weapon, I wonder whether it might be too strong to become intrinsic. My thought, though, when it comes down to this, is all about whatever they do, will it be something that doesn't completely gate off lower levels of the Crucible skill curve from getting flawless in the first place? I think that's my only real concern. I love the concept of a mod slot for it, though. I think that it allows them a lot of flexibility as far as design is concerned. It means that if a mod is too strong one season, there's potential to phase it out next season, or maybe just make it so that future adept weapons won't roll with that, and if it falls out of the meta, the mod will also fall out with it. It's a very interesting idea, and how it ties in potentially could work, but I really want to see how they expand on that. And also, the whole thing of the mod falling out of flavor that season might not apply if you can just apply it to any weapon. So it's a big question mark for me. I'd be interested to see what it looks like before I render final judgment, but we'll see what happens.
But before you pass, what about adept weapons, the concept in general? Are you pro? Are you against? Do you feel it gives too much of an advantage to a flawless?
I think that the idea of celerity on adept weapons is maybe it needs to be tuned down just a little, but I think that it fits for purpose with regards to what you're doing for trials, because again, it is a perk that will only activate when you're the last guardian standing. And beyond all of that, I think there is a bigger point to be made, which is that adept weapons generally are, and were, still a good idea. Having snapshot on adept weapons was really nice. Having even just, I think it was a buff to mobility in one of the things that you had for some of the guns. Little stat bumps like that worked. And it was also a different aesthetic, which showed that you've gone gold.
Yes.
I had my pulse rifle that I gotten from the lighthouse on my first run in Destiny, first run in year 3 of Destiny 1, which I still loved, the Blind Perdition. And it was an amazing pulse. It was so beautiful, especially with that lovely gold skin. So,
Sexy.
Little things like that. Those are the things that I'd look for. I don't know if I'd want there to be huge differences between them.
Gotcha.
But yeah,
Some
I don't
way
know.
to set them apart, like faster reload speed or just little stat boost, as you're saying, to be. Here's the normal version. Okay, you went flawless. This one is like the optimal version, but if you're duking it out with somebody, you still probably could win either way if you've got the skill to do it.
I'd say if you gave a small bump to handling, it would be a really good one. Like, a good player is going to be able to make a lot out of a small bump to handling, but somebody who is, say, less skilled is not going to necessarily notice the difference, and it's not going to set the weapons apart too much. With some weapons, it does make a huge difference. Like, low handling on Imperial Decree is why it doesn't get used over something like, say, Astral Horizon. Yeah. But bringing that up just a little bit, giving it a tiny pinch more, gives you the potential for that weapon to edge out against others, particularly at lower potentials, like lower ends of the card, where you might be able to make that work a little better. It's something where you might not notice it, but when you get to the really high tier of the card and where everything matters, that's going to be really good to have.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I don't know, little things, but I'm definitely not the most educated opinion on this.
We respect it. You're bringing dropping gems.
That's the big 3 problems. They talk about adept weapons coming in the future. And they also, the other topic, if you guys could tell, is cheating. That is the huge thing. And they talk about
there's cheating?
What? I thought that guy thought that guy had a fully automatic Whisper of the Worm. That was totally a thing.
No, it's just Thanos' ship that shot down Frostbolt one day.
Oh, man. Anyway, so they have stated since January, cheating is up about 50%, which is a huge number. And they expected it to get a bump in trials due to, obviously, people wanting to get through all the toughest people to get the rewards. But they said they have done some things. The Valve integration with the Steam data relay has helped DDoS attacks on Steam, which honestly you don't hear about that much. But unfortunately, as those fell away, we found other problems, which have been quite abundant. They give a couple stats as well. They said the banhammer has not been idle. Since Season of the Worthy launched, they have more than tripled the number of punishments from 656 in previous weeks to banning over 2,100 people per week, which is a lot. That's still doesn't sound like that big of a number when you see that the whatever mod that people were downloading for the cheating was downloaded like 300,000 times or something.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't sound like as big of a number. Not saying they need to just ban everybody, but then those two numbers don't seem to correlate that well. So they mention on PC where most cheating occurs, unsurprisingly, of course. They're saying memory poking attacks where like infinite ammo, ability, energy, infinite respawns, teleporters, which is nice to see them literally list all of this stuff, being as they're like they're aware, like aimbots, wall hacking, lag switching, and all of the stuff I just listed, infinite ammo, abilities, respawns, teleports. They're aware of it. At least they list it all here as things that they're working on. Now, aimbots, wall hacks, they have a plan, but they're not saying anything about it. They mentioned the way the game is actually built. To optimize certain things, especially for the memory poking stuff, as they're saying, to take for it being a PvE game, brings in issues when it comes to PvP things working.
That hybrid infrastructure that they were talking about.
Yep.
I think at the start of D2.
Yeah. So that definitely brings into something. So there's a subtle point we've struggled to convey over the years, and I did want to mention this. We do have servers hosting every match, but in our hosting model, those servers don't have complete authority over the game simulation to prevent all of these sorts of attacks naturally. This makes it more difficult, but not impossible, to mitigate these attacks. So I think that's probably one of the first times they've almost clarified that as well, just to say that there's something involved. And again, that's probably why Stadia is like the safest place to play right now, because you can't touch it. It's like it's like the MC Hammer of Crucible.
Yes.
But you've got lag switching as well, and then they say consoles. You've got DDoSing trials and consoles as well. So the two big things are, obviously, people have made these software things that will work on PC, and DDoSing still being a thing in trials. They're trying, but with the status of trials, with this large acknowledgement being a good thing, just kind of wanted to get your thoughts of if you've even experienced it, have you even seen any yet, and then also with the stuff that they're working towards, just kind of your thoughts on. We'll get to the policies here in a second, but just the acknowledgement of all of this.
As in, have I seen cheating, or have I seen the response to cheating?
No, have you actually experienced it firsthand yet?
Oh, cheating? every week past first week of trials, I've experienced cheating of some kind. Last week I was doing trials with Fun Police on
Fun Police.
Yeah, Fun Police. Yeah, Fimi is a great guy, but we ran into cheaters on our 7th game. We beat them, thankfully. But still, you know, like, that was one of the lighter weeks for cheating. And some people say that card of ours was incredibly lucky because they've run into them all week long.
Wow.
Like, I think the real high for it was unquestionably Widow's Court. Just wall hacking and aimbotting on Widow's Court when you have snipers is such a crazy huge advantage. It's ridiculous. And that's before you even mention all of the memory poking stuff that they talk about, where you can just, you know, fly around using 1,000 voices and have infinite respawns. You know, like, yeah.
That's like the
I've luckily never run into that, but oh god, it's actually no. I say that I've run into the infinite respawns once, but it wasn't in trials. It was in comp. I've never run into the, you know, Thanos ship kind of nonsense that Frostbolts or.
I saw that, yeah. Yeah, Fallout had a good compilation of all the cheaters, and it's sad that there are that many different types of things happening.
But yeah, long story short, it is rampant. It's so rampant.
It's so
bad. It's like a curse, dude. It's a disease. When you get, like, everybody's talking about, oh man, I just really want to get to 3 wins. Well, when you get past 3 wins, you will see the cheaters. You will see them en masse. Like every other game, if you sit there and you think that this boy is just way too cracked with a sniper rifle,
yes,
he's probably way too cracked with a sniper rifle. Go to Trials Report, and I guarantee you, most of the time, they're gonna have a 100 to 97% accuracy with their revoker because they're just toggling an aimbot off and on, and it's bad. It's so bad. So I'm really glad to see that they're doing stuff to address this. I'm glad that they name-checked all these things. And above all, I'm glad that they've also name-checked the fact that if you're having someone carry you and you know they're cheating and you get carried to Flawless by a cheater, you will also get banned. Because, screw those people.
Yeah.
Like, I've run into multiple fire teams who are doing this in comp, and it's very clear because 2 of them are from a clan, they're not cheating, and they've got a dummy account with them that it's just something that happens within their clan. And if your clan does that, or if your group of friends does that, you don't deserve to be playing this game.
Facts.
You do not deserve it. Like, I'm sorry, but don't. Don't even try and justify it to me.
I'm so with you on that. I know we jumped out a little bit.
Yeah, it was like jump down to the policies, but you were going where I was going next.
No, he's on fire. He's on fire because that's literally when I saw that policy change, I'm like, yes, Sponge, this is what I'm talking about. You're guilty by association. If you are in there with someone who is actively trying to carry you, everyone's getting locked up. I want everybody locked up.
Like, there's a reason the word accomplice goes within like criminal things. Accomplice is still a bad thing to be. So
thank you. I want you locked up, man, because it ruins it for everybody. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Aries in there, who ruined my card at 5 wins. Thank you, Aries. We was on Stadia. I saw you. He was good. I got Sinister in there too. He was good. But it was just so happy to actually face someone that wasn't cheating. So that was actually cool. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, like this is big. You know, I love that they're being specific. You know, obviously they can't give everything away because they don't want to give stuff away to the hackers or stuff they're going to do. You know, I like the working and involvement with Valve in reference to other things. You know, look, they're on it. You know, we know the situation in reference to, obviously, the pandemic and as far as resource management. But one of the things, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I know.
Yeah.
But I really liked what they said in reference to resource shifting. Because for me, I actually was worried because I'm like, look, we understand cheating is rampant. It's horrible, right? We understand they are not fully staffed from a team resource. Like there's people obviously working on D3 and people that have another IP matter, and that we know that team is split. I affectionately call them the B team. Ebontis gets mad when I call them that. But who's left working on the game?
Live team.
Yeah, you know, but it's just name conventions. But anyway, the team that is remaining, right? I felt bad because I know they're not fully stocked, and then obviously we have a pandemic, so they can't come into the office. They can't do the things that they would normally be able to do to maybe attack things with a bigger speed. So I feel that when the integrity of your game is threatened, that's dire consequence. That is fire alarm now, right? So to see this TWAB and to see them say, we're shifting resources, we're doing this, we're doing that, that to me gives me a lot of confidence that they are going to fix this thing, that they are going to save trials, you know, especially on PC. This is huge. This is huge. I know, Eve, you want to get into the rest of the little points, because obviously Blythe mentioned the guilty by association, the resource thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like, the big question, like some people are saying, is like the key policy, fire teammates. Like, I mean, we covered that. It's like if you were an accomplice, as like, and that's if you go on LFG and you find people, and all of a sudden you see this dude respawning over and over, report him and leave. Like, they're not going to get you for like one game, but they're saying if you go full 7 wins all the way flawless to Lighthouse, and this dude's cheating the entire way, yeah, you still watched it happen. You didn't do anything about it. So, fully agree with that. Shifting resources, we literally talked about that last week. I'm pretty sure with Aries.
Talked about it.
And then the last thing is something we mentioned. It could have been that Thursday when you were in PAX. And this is one thing I actually kind of wanted to get your thoughts on as well, Bife, because we had talked about this before.
Yes.
When considering, we're considering requiring a much higher player time investment, or basically we had mentioned some way to get into it, because they mentioned a quest or some requirement to get into trials, and all you literally have to do right now is get to 960. which is just walk up to Saint and be 960. And we had joked before, is like, is there a 4 or 5 hour quest, or is there, as they're saying, playtime of 100 hours? Like, I don't like the playtime 100 hours seems fitting, because honestly, if you're going to get into trials and want to be effective, you're going to need to spend some time to work on optimize your loadout. And if you want to be effective, like, that does put it kind of high. But again, also, is there like an 8-hour quest of PvP stuff where it's like all of the rhetorics? That's like a really long quest line that you have to go through just to unlock trials. That one's a bit lengthy. Some of the things in there are a bit crazy. But like, I think
rhetorics is a bit much.
Yeah, but something to where still it's things that you have to go accomplish, that like the free accounts that people just turn around and cheat. Oh, I got a new one. And they're just doing that type of stuff. What do you think the 100 hours is good, or what would you like to see as your way to get into trials? I mean, they're even saying having the season trials be part of the season pass every time.
I think that a combination of all of those is going to help. And it should be clarified before I say any of this that there are still going to be cheaters no matter what. Absolutely. People do this for money. And when it comes down to it, there will still be security breaches no matter what happens.
Right.
There will probably be less of them in the future, but people are always going to find a way. And some people make a business out of that, so they are very heavily invested in making sure that their stuff still works. Here's the thing. I think a combination of all of this stuff to play Trials makes sense. Question number 1, who does Trials tailor to? Well, it's got to tailor to a core Destiny fan. It's not completely endgame, but Trials should be looked at in a similar vein to the Nightfall Ordeal. And you've got to remember that the Nightfall Ordeal works at a variety of different light levels. You have the very base one, right? Which is just a standard Nightfall at 750 or something, right? You then have the 970 version, the 1000 version, the 1030 version, which is the Masters, and then the Grandmasters now. You're tailoring to every end of the spectrum with that. This is why Nightfalls are good. Grandmaster admittedly has its own problems, but this is the kind of thing they need to look at Trials for. It is something where people go when they have developed their character. So I think 100 hours of playtime in an activity not in orbit makes sense. And you need to make sure that there's only certain activities that counts for, because people still on PC can just sit in forges and gain 100 hours of playtime by being AFK. So go ahead and, make that in Strikes or in the Crucible.
Yeah, like, you put a set number of kills or enemies or anything, things that they track.
I don't
even
even think set number of kills or anything. I say you go ahead and you make it hours played. Because it's at that point, it's not about skill, it's about participation. I say 100 hours in Gambit, Crucible, or Strikes, and then go ahead and say this is fine. Maybe throw story missions in there too. Maybe patrol destinations, although that's a big toss because you could potentially just get people finding a farm spot. It's a question that needs to be asked. I think you easily throw raids in there too, because if they're at the end of that 100 hours, maybe they've tried Leviathan, maybe they're getting into some of that stuff, maybe they found a team, maybe they're LFGing it for the first time. You should count that 100 hours. Also, do everything else they're talking about it. Make it part of the season pass as something that's paid, and make it so that it's 1,000 power to get in. Because realistically, when you have light enabled in Trials, you don't want to go in there at 960 anyway. You want a more even playing field. You want to be 1,000 light, because you can bet that anybody who's worth their salt going into Trials every week is going to, by this point, be 1010 or 1009. It's that's just gonna be the way it is. So you want 1,000 power. I feel like it's very fair to increase that as the season goes on. So maybe having the first week be 960 to get into Trials, then 970 the next, then 980, then 990, then 1,000, and it's 1,000 for the rest of the season. That would have made a lot of sense, I think. But as time goes on, you've got to go ahead and acknowledge that people need to be invested in order to get into Trials in the first place. If people are going to go ahead and do that, and you're trying to attract a player population, the lack of cheaters is going to be the biggest siren call for people to come back. And the fact that these strong moves are being made is good. I just hope they haven't been made too late, because there has been... It's been 5 weeks since the launch of Trials. It's been 4 weeks since the cheater problem really started to show its ugly head. It's... For some people, that's already too late. For people who've got Flawless, I know that they're barely touching Trials anymore.
Good point. So I mean, this was music to my ears. I mean, when I saw this again, something we preached for the longest. You need that level of investment and requirement to be able to play. You know, we were all scared right after when I was at PAX, right? We were just like, when we saw it's free, I was like, it's a nice gesture. But that's not going to deter these cheaters who are running around with no fear and literally, you know, create a new character, create a new account, right back in the mix. We have to call it. So even if it means velvet roping trials a little bit, for the integrity of the game, it's worth it. Because you want the cleanest experience. There's nothing more damaging to a game than the integrity of your game being compromised. Where people come in there and they know they are not getting a fair experience. You have to eliminate that as much as possible. So this is huge. This is huge, man. I want to see how they go about it, what they end up deciding on. But all those suggestions you made, Bife, I'm for it. Whether it be 1,000 light, you know, whether it be, you know, hours played, the amount of activities done, you have to show a commitment and investment to the game before you have to be worthy. Season of the World, you have to be worthy to be into trials, man. That's where I'm at with it. So where you at, E?
I mean, I think this is all good stuff. I think the biggest thing I've just got to probably reiterate is Vife's thing of timing. I was like, I mean, your big worry is like you wanted this thing coming back. You were completely hyped. Is it on the, we're building the lighthouse. Like it's the hype and the road. And this is honestly, I told you my worry is like the rose-colored glasses of trials of what they used to enjoy. No, it was like, is it going to come back? Is it going to live up to the glory that they hoped? The rewards, unfortunately, being lackluster. The cheating just like magnified other issues with it. The tokens kind of being an odd choice. That whole farming thing, like. Tokens, I thought we were getting rid of those, not bringing more in. That's like the way it launched, unfortunately, was it's good to have the competitive nature. And if it was in a controlled environment, Trials is a really fun mode. But unfortunately, with the rewards and the issues that launched with it, is it going to need like a relaunch for another season? Or how are they going to be like, hey, by the way, we fixed a whole bunch of stuff and we're back for the people who gave up on it, as you said, if they'd got flawless 3 weeks ago. Are they checked out and done? I've seen some people on Twitter being like, hey, I haven't played in 2 weeks. And somebody else, and I can't remember the names, but they were pretty predominant players, like, I haven't played in 3 weeks. And I was like, that doesn't sound good to hear as well from people who are very predominant PvP players.
Right. No, I get it. I mean, I will just comment on one thing you said in reference to, I think the rewards, I think the summoner, what is it? Not the summoner, the, what's the auto, the 600 auto engine.
The summoner.
It's summoner, right? Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Astral, you know, I haven't seen the other weapons outside of those two. The other stuff, I agree. I don't think those are, you know, people are screaming from the rooftops from the other weapons per se. But those two in particular, because I just got the summoner, and it is absolutely amazing. So I do agree with you, you know what I'm saying, in reference to that. We just got to see. I mean, I think numbers-wise, I forgot what I haven't used Charlemagne in a while. I got to see what the numbers are. Yes, they have been going down. It's not completely dead yet, but we have to also keep in mind that I think someone did it. I don't know if it was Lono or someone did a comparison. The numbers are actually higher than what it was last year. Now, granted, PC population, you know, they added another platform. You got Stadia. I get that.
Stadia don't count.
Hey,
no, it's like it's the safest place to play Trials, but population-wise, it doesn't do much. Is all I'm saying.
We got our cloud servers. It's a nice environment. No one's manipulating anything. You know, you got to deal with a little input lag, but hey, after a couple matches, you get used to it, man. At least I know it's a clean run. You know what I'm saying? But no, I hear what you're saying. I mean, we shall see. But I actually don't think it's too late. I think what they have to act fast. I think that yes, it's on a steady decline. But they have to act fast. Neo Mental, stop being petty. # low population gaming. Stop being petty. I see you. Anyway, all I was going to say is I think they have time to correct it. You know, one thing they have stressed that some of these things are going to be short-term fixes, but there are going to be some things that are going to take some time. You know, and the key is going to be whether or not, you know, people stay around. I still love the mode. I still see people in there playing the mode. But they have to fix the integrity first and have to do it quickly. So we'll see by next season how much they're able to implement. That's my question.
Yeah. I mean, and that, like, obviously that stuff will get addressed as we go forward. We keep waiting on seeing what happens and everything. They say this TWAB was all about trials, cheating. They kind of mentioned that, and they said the next Bungie blog article, they are going to look into discussing pretty deeply the seasonal model, bounties, especially as Guardian Games utilizes them a lot, and the ways they're changing them up for future seasons. I just kind of wanted to get a quick touch from you, Bife, on how you have enjoyed seasonal model, because we've had many seasons now, coming up on our 8th one, versus expansions and stuff, and where you've just kind of, if you're enjoying, like, hey, this is that Season of Dawn was a good break, and how you think it's been going. Just as they're going to talk about the seasonal model, what do you think about it? What do you think they can, continue to improve?
So, to give a really quick note on it, I think Seasons is better, and I think it's better because we've seen the alternative. I don't ever want to hear a single person try and justify that Curse of Osiris was better than Season of Dawn. I don't want a single person to try and justify that, because we got the main story out of the way in the space of 2 hours, whereas we had an entire season's worth of story that was fed to us slowly over time, that evolved and was given room to breathe. People quit the game en masse because of Curse of Osiris.
Right.
Season of Dawn might have been slower, but it gave the story room to build. You can guarantee that if Warmind's events, on a similar flip, had been over the space of an entire season, if we had been slowly working up to facing off against Zol and Nokris, it would have been way better. Instead, we killed a worm god and his herald, who was the son of Oryx, who'd been excommunicated in the space of, an hour and a half? Yeah, I'm sorry. It doesn't even touch the other thing. In terms of content, and in terms of everything else that comes with it, I think that the simple thing now to remember is that when you're actually looking at what we get with seasonal models, there's lots more flexibility to it. Like, the expansions may have added planets, yeah, sure, whatever, but there's not enough room for that stuff anymore. Seasons now have the ability to add flexible content that can respond within the space of 6 months. Like, the response to everything that people disliked with regards to Season of Dawn will be coming in the next season, People disliking certain parts of things and people, to the same point, liking things is going to be reflected in that next piece of content.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that it's... People talk about we want expansions versus... And this is the other thing. People are crazy with this when they try and compare expansions, and then they say, why can't they just make more stuff like Taken King and Forsaken instead of the seasonal model?
Why
it's
can't
like,
they?
What? Do you want them? Do you want them to work to the bone? Like, it's you
Like,
physically
can I get a raid
do not.
every month, please?
Yes.
Yeah, like I was astounded by the scale of content that we got in year 5. Right? We got 3 raids in a year. That's incredible. We've never had that in Destiny.
Never had that. Yeah.
3 raids in the space of a year, right? Like, the closest we ever got was year 1 of Destiny transitioning to the end of year 1 and start of year 2, right?
Yep.
And we didn't get anywhere close, right?
Right.
This is a much more sustainable model. It's better in terms of the delivery for it. They need to go ahead and they still need to iron out problems, I'll grant you that.
Of course.
But holy lord, it's so much better than the content droughts we had back in Taken King.
Yeah, droughts were long.
Than the terrible, like, small DLCs that we had with the sake of Curse of Osiris. You know? Like, yeah, dude, but seasons are better. And I understand that people are going to look at that and they're going to think at first that seasons offer less content. But over the space of 3 months, it's way better. It is so much better. And people who complain about it, to me, are crazy. Or they have rose-tinted goggles and they do not remember how bad it was.
How bad the droughts
I remember,
were. Right?
I remember how bad the content drought was, not even from, like, Taken King to Taken Spring, but how bad it was just from the Dark Below up until House of Wolves.
House of Wolves.
Like, it was bad. The game was dead. There was nothing happening.
I
So
remember that.
Like, this was truly back in the Dark Ages. And if people don't remember that, then holy lord, you really don't understand how good we have it right now. I'll grant you, this season's worth of content has been bad. Like, it has been Bounty Simulator on the PvE side of things, plus a public event. It's been Legendary Lost Sectors, cool, okay, whatever. Guardian Games is effectively a Bounty Simulator as well, which is not great.
Bife keeping it real now.
know,
Let's see if Bife is going to keep it real. Continue.
and Trials has not hit well. Like,
Not hit
cheaters
well.
and low player
Right.
populations has ruined Trials. And they've made some silly decisions with regards to the loot. But the delivery of content and the pace at which this stuff has been coming out has meant that there's always something there week after week. And in a season where that works, like, say, Season of Opulence or Season of Dawn, you can see what the results are. The results are good. They are learning slowly but surely important lessons. It's important now for them to find a good rhythm and to make sure that each season is packed with stuff that's not just good quality, but is also worth players' time. That's their big kind of challenge coming up next. So that's all I'd say, man. Like, we have it way better with seasons than we did with everything else. They just need to be able to hit their stride and actually create good seasonal content consistently. Like, look back to Season of Opulence and what was done right. Not just the fact that, everybody loves Menagerie. Don't try and replicate that over and over again. But, like, what was really treasured about that season, It wasn't just the fact that we had a raid. It was the fact that then we got little things in between, like the Toland mission for Bad Juju in the Tribute Hall. Or the slow and steady hints that there was something coming around the corner with the moon. Like, these were all really cool times to be there for in Destiny.
Absolutely. This has to happen. I mean, at the end of the day, they have to pivot. They don't have Activision. They don't have Vicarious Visions. They don't have High Moon Studios. It's just them. So, also, this is a live service game, right? You have to continue to give content. Now, we do agree, yes, seasonal worthy is probably the lightest. You know what I'm saying? And there's definitely a lot of things that can be corrected. But the model just needs to be tweaked with certain things, and I think they seem to be receptive to that. I love, in this trial specifically, how they're saying, hey, this is what we're doing as far as trials. Next week we're going to be transparent with you as far as reward system, because I think, honestly, Bife, I think that's the biggest issue right now. I think if Grandmaster actually rewarded people for that investment the correct way, if trials, besides the cheating, rewarded people the correct way, if the Eververse store wasn't as dominant as it was with ornaments, because when we said last word, like, that's loot, Bife. Could you imagine doing the Pit of Heresy and looking like all the armor that we got from Taken King, the hard version, and you come out looking like a hive god? Like, people don't realize these ships that they're putting in there, these are things that we used to strive for in D1. It was a sign of, respect, and you were just like, wow, look at that Guardian in the tower. He did X, Y, and Z. But everything is just been such a shift to Eververse, and it's just like, oh, you just buy that, and then when you do the actual content, let's be real, like, God of the Salvation armor, okay, you know what I'm saying? It's a little bit of a reskin, So I think they also have to realize that loot is a big part of armor is a big part of the loot system, a part of the rewards, and they need to get back to that, man, because
I completely agree.
If those things corrected, man, people would be grinding these things that they want us to grind.
I think Eververse content should have no relation to whatever's going on in the season, and that whatever you make for Eververse, you also make something of equal value in the seasonal content that is delivered through PvE or PvP activities, right? Like,
ding, ding, ding.
Perfect example of all of this ends up being, say, the Season Pass ship that you got in Season 8, Season of the Undying, when Shadowkeep was launching, right? That was a perfect shoe-in for being able to make it drop in the Garden of Salvation raid, because it's actually related to the Kentok 3, and their story is told through what? All of the gear that you get from the Garden of Salvation, from the divinity to the armor to the weapons, Like, all of this stuff that we could have gotten is instead funneled into the Season Pass, and I think that if they just make it so that there's an equality between the cosmetic loot stuff that you can get from Eververse and the stuff that you can get in-game cosmetically, then it'll be fine. Because we already have no actual loot that creates stat values or anything coming from Eververse. Like ghosts, arguably, sure, whatever. But, you will never get this crazy piece of armor, like an exotic, alone from the Season Pass, right? Like, you'll get your weapons, sure, but you can earn that for free. You're never going to go ahead and pay for it. You can get certain high pieces of armor from the Season Pass, but they'll all be legendaries, and more so than that, you can also get them to drop randomly in the season for free. Like, I'll grant you, it's very low chance. It's much easier to get them just through the Season Pass, but there is, at very least, nothing that you will buy in the Eververse store. Like, there needs to be the parity of cosmetics.
Completely.
And that way it feels like there's more to the actual game. And, maybe that's not possible. Like, I hate to say it, but it's a scary possibility for everybody. But
no,
yeah,
buddy.
we
Don't
might
say
need
that.
to accept that
Don't
there
scare
is
me
no
with
possibility
that.
of it.
Come on, buddy. We gotta
'Cause, you
push
know,
them
like-
on that. Come on, buddy.
I know we gotta push them on that, but you know, like that's the scary reality of what it may be. What if there isn't enough money? You know, like
Look,
I
man.
really don't understand how it functions inside, and so my opinion is not valid for this one. But I will just go ahead and fight their corner for this one thing, and I'll simply say, I don't know enough to say that we couldn't have more cosmetics.
Not fair enough.
Like,
Fair
Yeah.
I genuinely don't know, and it kills me that I don't. But yeah.
No, that's fair.
Well, it's like we see the Eververse have a pretty substantial offering every month, and it is their
Right.
way, as they are completely independent, to support themselves as kind of an ongoing thing. Besides, buy your season passes, buy your expansions. That's their ongoing way. It's like, and pricing even at some point is a whole different discussion we've talked about before too. But I mean, I think as you guys are saying is, I sit there and I run Pit of Heresy solo, working on a flawless run. Eventually, I'll put that thing together. Doing, like, say if you did Pit of Heresy solo, maybe flawless or not, but as you did some of those things, some people run that thing like 100 times and they do carries. So if like you go through Pit of Heresy and you start getting a set of armor that makes you look like Zolmak, like I would be
Preach.
walking around like an absolute like fire knight
Preach.
beastman in the tower, and people like, where the hell did that come from? Like the moments in the tower from Rise of Iron, and I cannot remember what the end of it was called, where the armor came from. Those types of
Season
armor,
of Age of Triumph.
yes, that.
Yeah.
Those armor sets were beautiful, and maybe that type of D1 could handle it. I imagine the fidelity has to be there in D2, but as you say, is the bandwidth there to develop it? Maybe it's not everything all the time, but something, as you said, seasonal related, some specific, something to earn in these large activities. Like Pit of Heresy got like one weapon, not armor, not a ship. This season, the ship and the Sparrow both look like they fell out of Pit of Heresy.
Yep.
They do. The
Right?
two exotics. I'm like, why is
Thematically.
that not in there? They look perfect.
Yeah.
I bought one of them. I'm like, I don't even want to change the shader because it looks like
Yeah,
it
right.
came out of Pit of Heresy. So it's like, as I sit there and I'm like looking at the necropolis and everything like that, I'm like, if I could look any bit like this to show proof that I went down through here,
Yes.
would be amazing. So no, I'm with you. Like, they have to find some way to pay their bills. Got to keep the lights on. Understand that
We respect
completely.
that.
But on the other side, I feel, yeah, the earnable stuff in game is lacking, and it doesn't always have to be everywhere all the time. Full vendor refreshes every season, maybe not, but like pick and give us something to go after. Over, like if the dungeon lasts a
pinnacle
year,
content.
yeah, if the dungeon lasts a year, you know, give us a little more love there, for example. So that type of thing. So I totally agree for you guys. So.
Yeah, no, I agree, brother. I think you're on it. We've said this ad nauseum, but yeah, they have to reward that level of investment, especially pinnacle activity. You got to be able to show that stuff off. Completely agree.
Well, that is the end of the TWAB, and we are literally at a mark of time that I
Yes.
hopefully have respect. Hopefully, we didn't keep you too long, but it has been.
I should probably get back to work at some point.
I was like, we're getting
Yeah,
at that
we
point. I
got
was like,
back
I
for some
think
time.
I think we gotta call it at this point. But
Yeah, we gotta call it.
No, for sure. Man, it has been an absolute pleasure, and I think everybody could obviously pluck your brain for lore information. But,
Oh my god.
I mean, we are more than honored to have had you on here, sir. It has been 100% pleasure. Like, thank you from all of us to celebrate our 100th with you. I couldn't honestly pick
Oh,
it much
man.
better of a way.
Dreams come true, man.
Thank you for having me. And if you guys are listening over on Twitch, or if you're listening to this after the fact while it's been uploaded, it goes to YouTube. If I'm remembering correctly.
Yep.
right?
Yep. Both.
Yeah, if you are listening to this in any place, go ahead and give these guys a follow. Make sure that you check out their podcast every week. It's it's exciting times in Destiny. And if you are following Lord Cognito and Abontis, they are also content creators in their own right. So go ahead and exciting times.
Means a lot from the legendary Lord Pipe.
Yeah, it's like from,
You've been way too kind to me with the titles today.
Dude, I've been waiting to write that intro for you for the longest. You were on the
I
bucket
need
list of
you-
intros.
I need you to fight the announcers for the Corneo Coliseum in Final Fantasy VII because you're that hype, dude.
Dude, I love it. I love it. That's a classic scene. I love those announcers in that game. I love that scene. Dude, much appreciated, man. Like I said before, we couldn't thank you enough. 100 episodes. no one better to celebrate it with. You know, we love this game. We all have a passion for this game. You're one of the pillars in the community, so it's really cool. And yeah, shout out to you again, because a lot of people, when I tell people, they say, "Oh, Destiny doesn't have any story." Listen to a bite video. Let me educate you on some things. And they come around from this and say, yeah, you know what? Maybe Bungie didn't tell it the way, maybe express it the way they need it to be sometimes. But there is depth here. They're great characters, compelling stories. This is awesome, man. So, Bife, where can the people find you, man? What you got going on?
Predominantly speaking, YouTube and Twitter. Just hit 200,000 over on Twitter. If you
Whoa.
want to go ahead and follow, that's my
I saw
ramblings
that.
and
That's awesome.
random lore bits and things all over the place. So yeah, we're
Or
all
just
celebrating
terrifying
things
screams
today.
when dots move on a wall.
Yeah, no, or calls for everybody to stop panicking. Absolutely.
I like that tweet. That got me.
If you're looking for more curated content, YouTube is the place. YouTube.com/mynameisbife. You can go ahead and find that there. The nice thing about that is I get to go ahead and make structured videos, and yeah, I get to explore the different worlds of various games with you guys. Right now, that means Destiny and Doom. At some point in the future, we're going to pick
Yes.
Warframe back up, because
Nice.
there's a lot of stuff going on in Warframe right now, as far as I hear. And then also, there's other games here and there that we cover through That Sounds Like a You Problem, which is where my mods and I basically have fun and, excuse my French, we kind of fuck around a little bit.
No doubt.
It's late enough. It's totally fine. It doesn't count. You're good.
You're good.
Alright,
man.
sounds
You're
good. But yeah,
Awesome.
no, if you want to find me over there, youtube.com/mynameisbife, or just search My Name is Bife in the search bar. I feel like I might just beat out My Name is Jeff now. I feel like I killed the meme. I'm not sure. Anyway, point being, you can find me over there. That's where I make the majority of my content. I do not stream on Twitch anymore. Just FYI.
But just FYI. Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
Cognito, yeah, if you want to wrap
Yeah,
up.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I know we can get this man off to his world of things. So, yeah, if you guys know where to find us, like, quick 10 seconds, wrap us up, and then we will send him off.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, at Lord Cognito on Twitter, you already know, and Iron Lord Podcast YouTube. Please check us out. And every Sunday is the Lord's Day, 1 p.m. Eastern. We will have Rage of Virus on from lordsofgaming.net, man. So check that out. We'll be talking about all the latest consoles, everything that's going on in gaming. And of course, salute to my bro. 100 episodes, E. Super proud. This little passion project of ours. And it's just cool to see the growth. And again, cannot thank Bife anymore for the tremendous to have him come through by the campfire, just talking Destiny. You know what I mean? It's always a great thing. So salute on that. And that's all I got.
Yeah, and then for me, it's Ebontis literally everywhere, be it YouTube, Twitter, or Twitch. Obviously, if you guys are in here watching live, thank you. Chat has been amazing. A lot of generosity in here. I can't call them all out right now, but thank you guys, be it Twitter and YouTube. This has been amazing, and again, from both of us, I know it's like, yeah, thank you for the centennial. It was a perfect capstone to 100. So we thank you very much. And at the end of every episode, if you've ever seen Fire Team Chat, it's probably something similar. I always kind of do a little numerical wrap up, and we just say, and it has been, and altogether, Bife, this will be you as well. We say the last word, hence the name of the podcast, and that's where I
All right,
get
you
it
can
off.
say it in Latin if you want.
I looked it up, but I looked it up. I was like, to know what it was in Latin.
Ad extremum verbum, whatever.
Yeah, ad extremum verbum or something like that was like the technical
We'll leave that to
Latin.
Bife.
But I was like, yeah, it's like we can do it either way. But yeah, so thank you guys so much. Everybody in chat, it has been amazing. We got to let this man get back to his life, so we
Yes,
took
he
up
has
plenty
to
of his
work.
time. But for episode number 100, so cool. It's been April 24th, and special guest here. My name is Bife. Thank you. So it has been the last word.